The members of the Golden Generation had every reason to be enraged. They fought to the death, fighting hard for more than 2 days. How many giant ants had they killed on their way? All of them were drenched in blood and covered with wounds. Just when it looked like they were about to reap the fruits of their labor, Ling Han suddenly charged out, easily taking away what they yearned for. How could they tolerate this? Ling Han, do you really want to die? How detestable! Ah! It was as if they had all gone mad, as they charged towards Ling Han. However, vicious beasts didn't have much intelligence. In the eyes of the giant ants, Ling Han was clearly in cahoots with these invaders. Seeing the Imperial Sons charge at the front lines, they all resisted with all their might, fearing that they would harm the Queen Ant. How could this kind of front line be so easily broken through? All the Imperial Sons were instantly blocked. Previously, they had not been able to break through the line of defense and could only advance bit by bit. Now, no matter how furious they were, the battle prowess they could unleash was not enough to destroy the line of defense. They were mad with fury. It was clearly Ling Han who had snatched what belonged to you, so why are you stupid ants still stopping them? In truth, Ling Han had also been attacked by the giant ants. After all, he was the closest to the Queen Ant, so it was absolutely normal for him to be attacked madly by the giant ants. Thus, he immediately retreated, drawing out the distance between himself and the Queen Ant. As expected, though there was still a large number of giant ants attacking him, the strength of their attacks had decreased considerably. After all, he was only one person, so the threat he posed couldn't be compared to the Golden Generation elites. They had the advantage in numbers, and there were also Venerate tier elites among them. Ling Han was very relaxed. On one side, he was only parrying, and did not deliver a fatal strike. He maintained a balance with the giant ants, then looked towards the Imperial Sons. Everyone, thank you. These words were really vexing. The Imperial Sons were already incredibly furious in the first place, and when they heard these words, they naturally wanted even more to tear Ling Han into mush. Ling Han, you have offended so many members of the Imperial clans. Once you leave, you would be hunted down by all the members of the Imperial clans. This time, it's useless no matter what background you have. You are already a dead man, the Imperial Sons all declared coldly. Ling Han was too freakish, suppressing them to the point that they could barely breathe. How could they possibly contend for the throne with such a person? Thus, this kind of opponent could only be erased. After all, Buddha Doga had never said that Ling Han couldn't be targeted, after all. This gave them an opening. Ling Han laughed loudly. Come! How had he come all the way here? He had been hunted down and attacked, but when had he ever been overwhelmed? The more this was the case, the more his fighting spirit soared. By now, he was already a sect master and could be called a great elite. In the whole world, those whose strength were superior to him, how many Venerate tiers and saints were there in total? Let the storm come even fiercer. The Imperial Sons also calmed down, knowing that a verbal battle could not possibly defeat Ling Han. They merely stared menacingly at Ling Han, killing intent in their eyes. Let's go! They stopped fighting. Without the celestial medicine, what meaning was there left? The Imperial Sons quickly retreated. They had another idea, and that was to intercept Ling Han and kill him outside the ant nest. Once they retreated, though a large number of ants pursued them, a Venerate tier-level giant ant charged towards Ling Han. He couldn't win against this. Ling Han hurriedly broke into a run. At this moment, he exploded with a powerful battle prowess. As he shot out a punch, regulations and power boiled at the same time, instantly clearing out the area of nearly 300 meters in front of him. With a battle cry, he advanced rapidly. Behind him, the Venerate tier-level giant ant pursued him relentlessly. Shoo, shoo, shoo. The giant ant waved its antennas. An endless black light shot out. This was filled with corrosion, and when it hit the walls of the passageway, it forcibly corroded a large hole. And this was still because everything in the Imperial path was very special. Otherwise, how could the attack of a Venerate tier possibly cause such little damage? This giant ant seemed to have gone mad. As the black light continued to shoot out, even the giant ants that had rushed over to provide reinforcements and stop him were implicated. Thinking about it, it made sense. Having been invaded, and even the queen ant had almost been destroyed, how could these male ants not go crazy? Ling Han didn't even turn his head. Wang! A murderous aura burst forth. Instantly, a field of giant ants in the surroundings collapsed, and even that venerate tier-level giant ant was affected for a moment, which made it even more furious, spewing out black light at a higher frequency. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless either. The ant path was too narrow, and he needed to shrink his body, which greatly affected the use of Phoenix Wing's divine flight. It was impossible for him to escape the pursuit of a venerate tier elite. He unleashed the Primal Chaos Extreme Lightning Tower, which hovered above his head. This was forged from origin gold, and it could be big or small. Everything could be done as he willed. In this way, he didn't care anymore. No matter how the black light shot over, there would naturally be a pseudo-imperial weapon blocking it. As he fled, an exit finally appeared ahead of him. With a battle cry, Ling Han's figure sped up and suddenly shot out. At this time, he used Phoenix Wing's divine flight, and his figure sped up again. He quickly drew out the distance between himself and the giant ant. That venerate tier-level giant ant chased a few more steps, yet could only watch helplessly as Ling Han fled into the distance, and finally disappeared. After Ling Han tossed the giant ant aside, he immediately stopped using Phoenix Wing's divine flight. This movement technique was indeed awesome, but it was too eye-catching. From afar, one could see the raging flames. Thus, he immediately switched to channeling the strange shadow steps. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. In just an instant, two figures stepped into the sky and arrived. Imperial Sun Ming and Imperial Sun Tian, two venerate tier-level golden generation elites. As expected, Ling Han smirked coldly. There was nothing wrong with his caution. Those Imperial Suns were presently searching madly for him. However, even if Imperial Sun Ming and Imperial Sun Tian were venerate tiers, under the circumstances that they were not too close, they were still unable to find Ling Han from the shadows. Unless Ling Han was especially unlucky, and these two Imperial Suns had just happened to land right next to him, Ling Han would have no choice but to accept it. Imperial Sun Ming and Imperial Sun Tian exchanged a glance. They had both noticed the commotion caused by Phoenix Wing's divine flight, and had thus rushed over. In the end, they had still been a step too slow. This boy must be nearby. Find him, the two golden generations said darkly, each searching a different direction. Fuck, you guys are still getting excited? Ling Han drew out two energy jades, one in each hand, and aimed them respectively at Imperial Sun Ming and Imperial Sun Tian. Throw! Xiao, the two energy jades were thrown out at an extraordinarily fast speed. This kind of commotion naturally could not be hidden from the two Imperial Suns. They had both discovered the sneak attack at the first instant, and had naturally seen Ling Han as well. Imperial Sun Ming was just about to parry, but Imperial Sun Tian sent a message through divine sense. Dodge! Imperial Sun Ming pondered for a moment. Ling Han was a scheming person, and he had clearly not been discovered yet. However, he had actively charged over to attack them, so how could this be an ordinary attack? With this thought, his heart immediately shivered, and he hurriedly dodged. The two jade stones didn't hit anyone, but instead crashed into rocks and tree roots. These things were extremely unstable, and they immediately exploded upon impact. Boom! Terrifying energy surged, turning into two mushroom-shaped balls of energy that pushed out in all directions at an astonishing speed. This was pure energy without a shred of regulations, but because it was too strong, it was still boundlessly terrifying, enough to kill venerate tier elites. Imperial Sun Ming and Imperial Sun Tian were both astonished. It was true that they were venerate tier elites, but after all, they had only just stepped into this cultivation level. Even if it was golden generation, their battle prowess would only be 4 or 5 stars. Among venerate tiers, they could only be considered mid-level. Yet this energy storm was enough to kill peak stage venerate tier elites. Boom! The energy storm surged violently. Thankfully, they did not directly rush towards the energy jade, but rather chose to dodge. As a result, they managed to dodge the front, and were not directly hit by the energy storm. The two Imperial Suns both retreated, dodging the energy storm. Though they had still been scraped a little, they were completely fine. Ling Han also retreated to a very far location. He had already used this thing to trick people once, so he naturally knew where the safe zone was. In the distance, Imperial Sun Ming and Imperial Sun Tian both revealed baleful killing intent. This was especially the case for Imperial Sun Ming. If it weren't for Imperial Sun Tian's warning, perhaps he would have directly sent the energy jade flying with a palm strike. If that were the case, he would have been in deep trouble. Even if he didn't die, he would have been severely wounded. At the Venerate tier, the substitution seal was no longer useful, and this energy storm was comparable to a strike from a saint. Even if the substitution seal could be used by a Venerate tier, he would still die. Thus, it could be said that he had just barely escaped death's door. Ling Han! He spat out word by word, wanting nothing more than to devour Ling Han's flesh and blood. Ling Han smiled faintly, and his hands lit up. Shockingly, an energy jade appeared in each of his hands. He had picked up quite a number of these things at the bottom of the dried-up lake. Want to play? Ling Han asked with a smile that was filled with provocation. This enraged Imperial Sun Ming and Imperial Sun Tian. By now, they naturally knew how terrifying this seemingly insignificant jade was. They definitely could not allow it to hit them head-on. Otherwise, even they would be severely wounded. Humph, this thing is extremely unstable. It will explode if it is the slightest bit shaken, Imperial Sun Ming said calmly. As long as we draw out the distance, and attack from afar, and detonate the jade in your hand, you would be the first to be unlucky. As expected of the Imperial Sun, being able to see through the crux of the matter with a single glance. Ling Han cracked a smile. That's right. However, won't I seize the opportunity to use it? Oh, you delivered a strike and I still foolishly threw it out? He would definitely take advantage of the time between your attacks to make a move. In that way, even if the two Imperial Suns made another move, their counterattack would definitely be slightly later. The center of that energy storm could possibly be closer to the Imperial Suns. This caused the two Imperial Suns to frown. How could a mere minor advanced tier be so difficult to kill? I don't believe that, Imperial Sun Tian sneered. He sent out a palm strike, which turned into a massive dark cloud that enshrouded Ling Han. The area covered by this attack was too large, and under the shockwave of power, it was enough to detonate the energy jade. Ling Han laughed loudly and put away the energy jade. Then, he summoned the Primal Chaos Extreme Lightning Tower to take this attack head-on. Pong! With this strike, Ling Han couldn't help but flush red, and a mouthful of blood was stuck in his throat. This was a Venerate tier elite, after all. Even if he attacked from such a far distance, and Ling Han had also unleashed the Primal Chaos Extreme Lightning Tower, it still dealt a considerable blow to him. However, Imperial Sun Tian and Imperial Sun Ming were even more stunned. What? If a Venerate tier elite made a move, shouldn't he have easily crushed the sect master? But now, Ling Han actually didn't even spit out a mouthful of blood. Die! Imperial Sun Ming also moved. With a punch, his attack turned into a fierce tiger, using power as bones, regulations as blood and flesh, roaring as it charged towards Ling Han. The speed was astonishingly fast. Ling Han didn't linger in battle. These two people were Venerate tier elites, and even if he could rival them, he would probably have to be a 9-star sect master. In fact, it would have to be after he had broken through the limits of the minor advanced tier. Now was not the time for battle. Ling Han released a battle cry, and Phoenix Wing's divine flight unleashed as he rapidly retreated. You want to flee? Imperial Sun Ming and Imperial Sun Tian both set off in pursuit. However, an energy jade suddenly smashed over. The two Imperial Suns had no choice but to dodge. Boom! The energy storm surged again, forcing the two Imperial Suns to be unable to pursue him at all. When the energy storm subsided, where was Ling Han? The two Imperial Suns exchanged a look, and both felt a strong sense of defeat. Yet Ling Han had still managed to escape. In the future, this brat would only become stronger and stronger, and even if they were Imperial Suns, because they had already reached the level of Venerate tier, the help that the imperial clan could give them would also become lesser and lesser. Their advancement would definitely slow down or even stagnate for a very long time. Then, when Ling Han's cultivation level caught up, not only Ling Han, but also Yang Yihuan, He Luo, and the others. Let's take advantage of their weak cultivation levels to kill them. The two imperial sons nodded in agreement. This was a rare opportunity, and it was also possible that this was their only chance. Concocting the Little Nine Emperor's 10 Leaves pill required only celestial medicines that contained celestial qi. As for what specific type they were, there was no restriction. I have the main ingredient, and now it is the supplementary ingredient. After Ling Han shrugged off the two imperial sons, he immediately found a secluded place and began to study those black grass. He still didn't know what this thing was, but it didn't matter. Concocting the Little Nine Emperor's 10 Leaves pill required only celestial medicines that contained celestial qi. As for what specific type they were, there was no restriction. I have the main ingredient, and now it is the supplementary ingredient. Ling Han murmured. Though he had obtained a few 6-star celestial medicines, if they were used to concoct alchemical pills, this was still not enough. I wonder if I can find all of them here. Ling Han also continued onwards as he searched. Was it possible that he would discover celestial medicines on the way? It had to be said that his luck was not too bad. In the following 7 days he had repeatedly made gains. Though he had not obtained any celestial medicines that contained celestial qi, there was still a considerable number of ordinary 6-star celestial medicines. I'm still missing 3. A look of delight appeared on Ling Han's face. He had not thought that everything would progress so smoothly. With another 3 celestial medicines, he would be able to concoct the Little Nine Emperor's 10 Leaves pill. Then, once it was concocted, the quality of the celestial qi that he would obtain would be greatly improved. He continued to search, but his luck seemed to have taken a sharp turn for the worse. In the next 2 days, he actually did not manage to find another celestial medicine. To say nothing of 6 stars, he would not even be able to find a 1-star celestial medicine. He searched thoroughly, but did not find any celestial medicine. Instead, another palace appeared ahead of him, Purple Wind Palace. Ling Han walked over, only to see a person standing at the door. Her bearing was captivating Shui Qingchong. Although her back was facing Ling Han, her divine sense was extremely sensitive. She immediately turned around and looked at Ling Han. As the Genesis world's rulers, the 7 of them had an indescribable good impression of each other. Shui Qingchong nodded at Ling Han as a form of greeting. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head. Beauty Shui, do you have any 6-star celestial medicine? Shui Qingchong was astonished. What are you trying to do? If you have these 3 celestial medicines, I can give you something good. Ling Han recited the names of the 3 celestial medicines. It can help you increase your cultivation level. Yes. Shui Qingchong did not hesitate, and directly threw out 3 celestial medicines for Ling Han. She was very straightforward, and also showed her trust in Ling Han. Wait for me for 3 days. Ling Han picked up the celestial medicine, and immediately turned to leave. He wanted to find a place to concoct alchemical pills. Shui Qingchong did not stop him. Though Ling Han had taken away 3 precious 6-star celestial medicines, he had only given her a verbal promise. Firstly, because they were both masters of Genesis world, she still had some trust in Ling Han. Secondly, though these 3 celestial medicines were 6 stars, they didn't contain celestial qi, so she didn't especially treasure them. If Ling Han had really screwed her over, then she would not have any further contact with Ling Han in future. That was all. Ling Han left the palace far away. He was sure that those who came here would definitely go and fight to death over this palace, so he decided not to join in on the excitement first. He took out the alchemy cauldron and made all the preparations. Then, he replayed the process of the alchemy saint concocting the Little Nine Emperor's 10 Leaves pill in his mind. Alright, that was enough. He was filled with confidence. In terms of alchemy, he was even steadier in that than cultivation. Boom! The cauldron's fire blazed fiercely. He threw out medicinal ingredients and truly began concocting. Everything was as smooth as flowing water. Although this was Ling Han's first time refining, he had already simulated it many times in his mind. With his strength as the Alchemy Emperor, he was completely capable of succeeding in a single attempt. It should be known that long ago, he had already been able to concoct a venerate tier-level alchemical pill. 3 days later, he successfully finished his work. There were a total of 11 alchemical pills in the cauldron. It was unknown how much celestial qi was contained in each alchemical pill. The quality must have increased greatly, and if it could still be maintained in quantity, that would be amazing. However, no matter how he thought about it, this was impossible. Ling Han took one out and consumed it. Instantly, celestial qi diffused throughout his body, and the fruit of cultivation rapidly grew. Woo! What a strong celestial qi! Ling Han was stunned. The quality of this celestial qi was really high, causing waves to rise in his mind, as if it was about to explode. Half a day later, peace returned to his mind. The fruit of cultivation had enlarged again, and the second golden thread had also become slightly denser. That's right. Going by this deduction, these alchemical pills were enough to push him up to 3 stars. Ling Han did not continue to refine the alchemical pills. Since he had promised Shui Qingchang to wait 3 days for him, he would definitely have to return once the 3 days were over. When he returned once more to the Purple Wind Palace, Shui Qingchang was not the only one here. There was also Jing Haoran, Origin, and the other rulers of the Genesis world. He did not see anyone from the imperial clans. Ling Han walked over and handed an alchemical pill to Shui Qingchang. Here, it's what I promised you. Shui Qingchang didn't ask what it was, and simply put it away. The 2 of you? Jing Haoran began to seek death again. His eyes swept over Ling Han and Shui Qingchang, his expression filled with suspicion. Is there some kind of adulterous relationship? Did you have to say the word, adulterous love? Shui Qingchang's eyes instantly became sharp, shooting out a strong killing intent. Ling Han sighed. If you don't seek death, you won't die. Why can't you remember the lesson? Jing Haoran wore a solemn expression as he pointed at Ling Han and said, If there's no problem, why do you have to immediately explain? There's a saying that an explanation is equivalent to a cover-up. He pounded his chest and stomped his feet. My goddess, I finally fell in love with a goddess. Yet a good cabbage has been stolen by a pig. These words successfully provoked Ling Han and Shui Qingchang into killing intent. What part of me looks like cabbages? Ling Han questioned. Shui Qingchang had initially been filled with killing intent, but when she heard these words, she almost stumbled. Fuck, you are really too shameless. Could it be that I am the pig here? In this way, the atmosphere immediately turned awry. What is it? Can't you enter? Ling Han asked. 3 days ago he had seen Shui Qingchang standing here, and it was still the same now. We can't. Origin shook his head. This stage is too unique. How is it special? Ling Han asked. The main doors of the palace are guarded by an ancient tool spirit, and one can only enter the palace through its approval, Myriad Dao explained. But the problem is that its approval isn't targeted at strength, comprehension ability, and so on. Instead, it's completely because you're not pleasing to the eye. Ling Han gritted his teeth. This was weird. Neither of you passed? He asked, a smile curling up the corners of his lips. This caused Ding Shu to grit his teeth, and asked, What is the meaning of this? Are you complaining that we are ugly? Ling Han laughed loudly. That was what he meant. Of course, he was only teasing him. If you can, then go ahead. Ding Shu provoked. Ling Han strode forwards, and arrived at the entrance of the palace. At this moment a figure appeared. It was an old geezer who looked to be in his 60s. He had a sharp mouth and monkey-like cheeks, and his appearance could only be described as extraordinary. Shoo. If you're too ugly, don't come and embarrass yourself. The old geezer waved his hand the moment he saw Ling Han, a look of disdain on his face. Pooh! Behind him, Ding Shu and the others were already laughing madly. How about it? You've also suffered a blow, right? Ling Han also mocked internally. Though he could not be considered world-shakingly handsome, he could still be considered a handsome man, no matter what. What kind of fucking eyes did he have? But to argue with the tool spirit? He could sense that this place was densely covered with killing intent. As long as the tool spirit moved, it would be able to awaken a certain deadly weapon and give him a fatal blow. He suddenly realized that the old geezer's sharp mouth and monkey-like cheeks looked very familiar. Brother Monkey? Indeed, though this old man was in human form, from a certain angle he was more like a monkey. It was just that he did not have any fur or tail. Ling Han turned around and transformed into Brother Monkey. Ding Shu and the others all shook their heads and smiled upon seeing this. How could they not see that the old geezer looked like a monkey? Thus, in order to suit his tastes, they had long since transformed into monkeys, but so what? No matter how much they looked like monkeys, they were all considered ugly by the old geezer. It was useless. Ling Han turned around and said to the old man with a smile, "If that's the case, then wouldn't I be handsome?" "Handsome? You are world-shakingly handsome," the old man exclaimed, his face filled with stars. "There's actually such a handsome person in this world. You are practically blessed by the heaven and earth, exuding the beauty of heaven and earth. Holy fuck!" Ding Shu and the others almost collapsed into a heap. They had been laughing just then, but this time they were shocked. Fuck, why was it that Ling Han was handsome when he was pretending to be a monkey, but they were ugly? This didn't make sense. This didn't make sense. Meanwhile, Ling Han nodded internally. Brother Monkey was a descendant of the Battle Saint Emperor, and in terms of the most handsome monkey, it was definitely the Battle Saint Emperor. Thus, if he imitated Brother Monkey, he had a 90% chance of passing the test. The truth was indeed so. "Brother Monkey, thanks." Ling Han smiled faintly, turned around and winked at Ding Shu and the others. Then he walked into the palace. Ding Shu and the others were all enraged upon hearing this. Sure enough, ugly people would be blocked from entering. They were naturally dissatisfied. They also transformed into Brother Monkey and walked forward. No. Though you all have become handsome now, but since the first person has entered, you all have to wait for a day. The old man stopped them. Waiting for a day? Ding Shu and the others all sighed. No matter how many treasures there were in that palace, Ling Han would definitely have taken all of them. Right at this moment, another person came over. Though Yang Yihuan, Feng Miaoling, and He Luo had come from different directions, they had arrived at practically the same time. Where is Ling Han?" Their eyes swept over them and asked at the first instant. In their eyes, Ling Han was their strongest competitor. Thus, their hearts jolted when they didn't see Ling Han at all. Ding Shu and the others all pointed at the palace. As expected, Yang Yihuan and the others all sighed. They had spent some time to break through to the Venerate tier, but in the end, they still couldn't catch up to Ling Han even if they tried their best. In the distant skies, a great many people were presently rushing over. 1, 2, 3, 4. There were about 30 of them. Imperial Sun Ming, Imperial Sun Tian, Golden Generations, and a few Silver Generations. They soon arrived, and as their eyes swept over Yang Yihuan, Ding Shu and the others, killing intent surged from their bodies. These people were too freakish, posing a serious threat to the Imperial Sons. If they were not killed, then the Imperial throne would really have nothing to do with the Imperial Sons. Just in time. This was a mystery realm, and there were really too many people that had died in the Imperial path, so even if they were killed, so what? This was a rare opportunity, so they definitely couldn't miss it. "Very good. All of you are here," Imperial Sun Ming said balefully, contempt flickering in his eyes. Even it was suspected that there was a pseudo-emperor standing behind Yang Yihuan and the others, they still felt a sense of disdain. This was the feeling of superiority of the imperial clans. Otherwise, even if you were a pseudo-emperor, so what? A pseudo-emperor could not forge an imperial weapon or create the imperial scroll. They could only lead the brilliance for a while. How could they compare to the eternally glorious imperial clans? "So what?" He Luo asked calmly. "Since you're together, we can kill all of you in one go, so we can save some effort," Imperial Sun Tian said. "Oh." Yang Yihuan couldn't help but shake his head, saying, "I was just thinking that the imperial sons of your generation didn't have much ability, but from the look of things now, Even your minds are so weak. Do you think that the imperial throne could be achieved by cutting out weak opponents? Then you guys are really too naive. Only the strongest clash can establish the position of emperor. Imperial Sun Ming smirked coldly. If you talk too much, I'll start with you. He stretched out a hand to grab Yang Yihuan. Boom, a large hand stretched out, covering the skies and covering the sun. Regulations appeared, which was incredibly terrifying. Yang Yihuan was unafraid. His eyes widened slightly, and two god tools fell out of his hands, slashing towards Imperial Sun Ming. These two god tools had been forged by the regulations, and they had been fused with the power of a venerate tier elite. In an instant, they had transformed into giant blades. The two swords slashed over, and the massive palm was instantly sliced into 3 parts. The regulations had also been forcefully severed. Yeah? Everyone was shocked, including Ding Shu and the others. Fuck. How did Yang Yihuan suddenly become so powerful? Previously, he was only a 4-star or 5-star sect master, so why had he suddenly exploded with battle prowess on the level of Venerate tier? Venerate tier. He is indeed a Venerate tier elite. In such a short amount of time, how did he become a Venerate tier elite? This caused everyone to be completely stunned. This had completely defied the iron rules of cultivation. No matter how awesome the celestial medicine was, it should not be as awesome as this. Only Feng Miaoling and He Luo wore calm expressions. They naturally knew that Yang Yihuan had reached the Venerate tier countless times. However, he had severed his own cultivation level and started from the beginning again, so it would be extremely easy for him to return to the peak stage now. It was not just Yang Yihuan. The two of them were the same as well. In fact, they had already returned to Venerate tier level. In reality, the lower one's cultivation level, the greater their gains would be if they walked the imperial path. This was something that they had concluded from their many experiences, but this time, they were really forced into a corner by Ling Han and could only break through ahead of time. Yang Yihuan smiled faintly and said, "You still want to use your cultivation level to suppress others?" He charged out, launching a counterattack at Imperial Sun Ming. "Now, I'll let you suffer the consequences of your own actions." Boom, he struck out with both palms, and as the blow was delivered, there were actually 9 7-star regulations. Imperial Sun Ming was astonished by this. This was because he was also a 2-star Venerate tier elite like Yang Yihuan. However, he could only unleash 8 7-star regulations with a single strike. This was an instant ability, and it depended on the strength of one's divine sense. Even though there was only 1 additional regulations, that was a difference of a single star. From the sect master level onwards, the gap of a single star was like a gulf. Imperial Sun Ming shouted loudly as he charged forward. As the Imperial Sun, and as the flag of the Golden Generation, there was naturally no way he would cower from battle. He had still been dreaming, relying on the Imperial Scroll to compensate for his shortcomings in regulations. However, the moment they exchanged blows, he discovered that his opponent was stronger than him. Could it be that you two have cultivated the Imperial Scroll? Otherwise, it could not be explained that the other's power was stronger than his own. That power was incredibly pure, and could only be tempered by the Imperial Scroll. This Imperial Scroll was the foundation of an Imperial clan. It was a secret that was not taught to others, because it also involved the control of the Imperial weapon. What Imperial clan would dare teach the Imperial Scroll to another? Even among the Imperial clans, there were very few that could cultivate the Imperial Scroll. Ling Han had cultivated the Imperial Scroll, and that was because he had obtained the inheritance of the descending Heaven Holy Emperor. However, what was Yang Yuan relying on? Wasn't there a pseudo-emperor standing behind him? How could a pseudo-emperor create an Imperial Scroll? That was the Great Emperor's summary of appreciation of heaven and earth. Only the Great Emperor could create it, and it was passed down through the generations. Hong! 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 The two of them battled fiercely. In just a dozen over moves, it could be clearly seen that Imperial Sun Ming was at a disadvantage. This caused everyone to sigh. The Golden Generation was really about to bow out. First, it was Brother Monkey that had appeared out of nowhere, battling 3 great imperial suns all by himself. Alright, it could still be claimed that Brother Monkey had the advantage in terms of cultivation level at the time. After all, it was a battle of 2 stars against 1 star. But now, their cultivation levels were completely the same, yet Yang Yihuan had forcefully suppressed Imperial Sun Ming. What else could he say? The Golden Generation was truly about to dejectedly leave the stage. No! Imperial Sun Ming roared. He didn't accept this. He was the descendant of ancestral King Wentian, and had grown up with a halo around him. He was called the person closest to ancestral King Wentian. He was defiant, and could not accept defeat in a battle of equal cultivation levels, especially such a terrible defeat. He used all his ultimate moves, imperial techniques activated, regulations shown brilliantly, and stimulated heaven and earth. However, in front of Yang Yihuan, this was completely useless. Suppress, 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 suppress. It was only 100 moves, and Imperial Sun Ming had no choice but to accept such a terrible defeat. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, he was outmatched. The expressions of the Imperial Suns all changed drastically, and they were rendered speechless. Even the strongest Golden Generation had been defeated, which was equivalent to pushing all of the Imperial Suns off the high altar. All of them had landed solidly on the ground. Yang Yihuan had initially been calm and composed, as if he didn't take anything to heart. Now, however, he was showing a baleful killing intent as he chased after Imperial Sun Ming and attacked him relentlessly. He was actually trying to kill him. This stunned everyone. Did Yang Yihuan really dare to kill the Imperial Sun? However, with so many witnesses, could it be that he wanted to kill everyone to keep the secret? Otherwise, even if there was a pseudo-emperor standing behind you, how could the Wentian Imperial clan be willing to give up the matter? They would definitely take out the Imperial weapon to seek an accounting. Imperial Sun Ming fought back with all his might, yet he was only falling further and further into a disadvantage. If this continued, he would definitely die. He did not dare continue the battle, and hurriedly turned around to flee for his life. Speaking of which, after Ling Han entered the palace, he discovered that there were strong winds howling here, and they were tangible at that. Purple-colored wind. How could the wind have any color? Ling Han was surprised. He looked closely. The reason why this wind was purple was because there was a kind of purple substance in the wind. However, this substance also seemed to be a gas, and when it hit the skin, he did not feel anything at all. Ling Han activated his eye technique and carefully observed the surroundings. No, this purple substance was a very small material, and there was an extremely large amount of it. Thus, if it floated in the air, it would form a purple-colored wind. When these substances hit the body, they adhered to the skin and were actually slowly absorbed. Ling Han was surprised. After this purple substance entered his body, it was hidden under his skin, forming a thin film. It was as if this was a second layer of skin. Ling Han sensed for a while, and felt that this purple film was extremely sturdy. It'll only shatter if it can withstand the full power attack of a sect master above 6 stars. He murmured, his eyes filled with shock. Most importantly, the purple substance was still endlessly surging into his body, causing that membrane to become thicker and thicker. Hiss, at this rate, wouldn't he be able to withstand the attack of a venerate tier or even saint? Then wouldn't he be able to do as he liked? So exaggerated? Ling Han walked forwards. In any case, the wind was constantly blowing, and he was also constantly absorbing the purple substance. His speed was extremely fast, and the purple-colored substance continuously surged into his body, causing this film to become thicker and thicker. No, it wasn't thick, but concentrated. For example, if there were 100 purple substances on the fingernail-sized membrane previously, it had now become 120, 150, and it was still continuously increasing. He walked to the end of the palace hall, and saw that there was a jade board here. It was very thin, and there were some words written on it. Ling Han studied it carefully. This was the description of the purple substance. This was called purple calamity grain. When it was fully absorbed, the defense it formed could even block the full power attack of a saint below 5 stars. However, every time it absorbed the impact force, the purple calamity grains would lose a portion of its vitality, and when all its vitality had been lost, this would lose its effects and would automatically be expelled from the body. Theoretically speaking, he could withstand 5 attacks from a saint. Of course, the upper limit was from a 4-star saint to a 5-star saint. If he had to sustain an attack from a 9-star saint, then even purple calamity grains would probably not be able to protect Ling Han. He would definitely die. If it was a Venerate tier, he could sustain as many as 80 attacks, and the upper limit was 9-star Venerate tier. When you don't need to use it, you can store it in the depths of your body. Otherwise, a portion of your vitality would be expended every time you battle. Even if you battle with a sect master, you would still cause the purple calamity grains to completely lose its vitality. Ling Han murmured to himself. Half a day later, the depth of the purple wind in the palace clearly weakened by more than half, and about half of the purple calamity grains had been absorbed by him. However, this also reached the extreme, and he couldn't take another step further. Ling Han felt slightly regretful that he hadn't been able to absorb all the purple calamity grains, which would have benefited the others. However, he alone had taken more than half of it, and the others could only share the remaining. The gap between them was not just a little bit. With this in mind, his thoughts cleared up. Ling Han searched around for a while. There was a transference portal here that allowed one to leave. He was leaving. Without hesitation, he took a step forward. Space changed, and the environment immediately changed. Ling Han looked again, and he had already arrived in a glacier. A chill assaulted him, causing him to shudder. Fuck! Why is it so cold? Ling Han gritted his teeth, the chill seeping into his bones. He took a step forward, and the moment he moved, the chill became even stronger. It was as if the air had turned into blades that continuously slashed at his body. His clothes did not have the slightest effect of keeping out the cold. It can't be that I have to use purple calamity grains here, right? Ling Han thought. With a thought, he drew out the Saint Grade staff and activated the bead within. Instantly, a shield of light enveloped him. The wind blew over, but it did not break through. Haha, this works. Ling Han nodded, raised the staff in his right hand, and strode forwards. After walking for half a day, he discovered that the temperature had actually risen again. Though it was still very cold, even without the protection of the natural treasure, he was completely unafraid. Could it be that, according to the normal method, he should have waited until now to take action? Forget it. In any case, I have a treasure to protect me, so why should I follow the rules? After walking for a while, he smelt a refreshing fragrance. His nose twitched, and he hurriedly followed the fragrance. Soon, he discovered a cave. The cave wasn't deep, and he arrived at the end after taking a few steps. There was a pit on the ground, and it was filled with a milky white liquid. It was this thing that was exuding a refreshing fragrance. What spiritual milk is this? I'll taste it first. Ling Han took a small sip, and instantly, his whole body felt warm, his vitality burning fiercely. This is treasure fluid that stimulates and strengthens one's life force. A look of delight appeared on his face. This was great profit. Though he was very young now, filled with vigor and vitality, some people had been stuck at a certain cultivation level for innumerable years. They clearly had hopes of breaking through, but because they were not energetic enough, their vitality was deficient, which led to them being unable to break through. Otherwise, their vitality would definitely be burnt to nothing, and they would directly die. Hence, if this kind of treasure fluid was sold to those old Venerate tier elites that were stuck at the cultivation level barrier, it was believed that a great many people would be willing to pay a great price in exchange for it. He carefully stored this treasure fluid into a jade bottle, and just at this moment, a drop of liquid dropped down from the upper wall of the cave. Ling Han hurriedly stretched out a hand to capture it, and put away this drop of treasure fluid as well. This treasure fluid wasn't seeping out of an underground spring, but rather dripping from above. Ling Han looked up, only to see that the cave walls were slightly damp. A drop of treasure fluid was slowly forming. By the looks of it, it would take half a day to form a drop. He tried to dig, searching for the source of the treasure fluid, but he did not succeed. The stone wall was too sturdy, and when he used destructive energy, he actually felt an extremely dangerous pressure. Perhaps, when he broke open the rock, there would be great killing intent. Forget it. His gains were already not small, and he did not have the time to wait slowly here either. Who knows, there may still be some good stuff ahead of him. He exited the cave, and instantly shivered. It was so cold. Taking a step back, he returned to the cave, and instantly the temperature rose rapidly. Ling Han nodded. Actually, even without that natural pearl, he could still pass through here. He only had to travel when the temperature rose, and find a hole to avoid the cold when the temperature dropped. Who cares? Ling Han strode forward. He had a natural treasure, so he could do as he liked. After walking for another half a day, he discovered a second hole, but there was no refreshing fragrance wafting from here. He could see it directly with the naked eye. In any case, he would enter the cave to take a look. Ling Han entered and searched for a while. There was definitely no treasure fluid, and the other items were also nowhere to be seen. This was an empty hole that could only be used to avoid the cold. Ling Han sighed and continued to walk forward. Ling Han walked all the way. On the way, he discovered a considerable number of caves that he could use to avoid the cold. But whether it was the treasure fluid or celestial medicine, there wasn't any, and he did not have the slightest bit of gain. Thinking about it, it was fine. The treasure fluid was really very precious. If it was used well, it could completely be traded for a large amount of 7-star celestial medicine for him. One should be contented with what one had. After walking for 3 days, Ling Han finally walked out of the icy plains, and a canyon appeared ahead of him. Ling Han pondered for a moment before deciding to refine the little 9 Emperor's 10 leaves pill first. He would increase his strength as much as possible. He found a quiet place, took out the alchemical pills and began to refine them. 1 pill, 2 pills, 3 pills. He had concocted a total of 11 pills. Previously, he had eaten 1 and given another to Shui Qingchong. Now, there were still 9 pills left. With each pill, the rich celestial qi would strengthen the fruit of cultivation. When he ate the 8th pill, the second golden thread on the fruit of cultivation finally reached the consummate state. 2-star sect master, peak stage. He spent some time trying to break through to the level of 3-star sect master. He was only advancing his minor level, so there was no need for him to accumulate too much energy. He could completely advance his cultivation level first, and then slowly stabilize it. The Dao fruit tree naturally grew as well, swaying in his mind with a strange rhythm. Ling Han ingested the last little 9 Emperor's 10 leaves pill, and the third golden thread of the fruit of cultivation, from lighter became deeper. This breakthrough took him about 6 days. Ling Han returned to the canyon, only to discover that many people had already arrived. There were regulars like Yang Yihuan and Feng Miaoling, as well as rulers of the Genesis world like Ding Shu, Origin, and so on. In addition, Imperial Sun Ming, Imperial Sun Tian, and the other golden generations had also arrived, but these 2 most powerful Imperial Suns wore expressions of disappointment, as if they had suffered some great blow. Furthermore, in terms of conduct, the Imperial Suns were also extraordinarily timid, like children that had done something wrong. This was rare. In addition, Brother Monkey had also arrived. He was presently crossing the canyon. They were not at the entrance to the canyon, but rather on the cliff on one side. Connecting these 2 cliffs were threads. Upon a closer look, one would discover that these threads were actually formed from regulations. When one walked on it, the threads of regulations would tremble, and one could be easily overturned. Thus, those walking on it had to resonate with the regulations, and move with the regulations, becoming one with the regulations. Ling Han saw a silver generation elite exclaim in surprise as he walked, falling down from the silk of regulations. He was like a large rock that had fallen into the water. He didn't soar up at all, and directly fell to the bottom of the valley. As expected, flying was not allowed here. Ling Han walked over. He didn't greet Brother Monkey. At this moment, Brother Monkey was focused on resonating with the regulations. He definitely couldn't distract him. Hey, Ling Han! Ding Shu and the others had not even begun their journey when they all greeted Ling Han. Ling Han nodded and asked them some questions. Though this was the first time Ding Shu and the others had come here, They had watched for a long time, hadn't they? Furthermore, Yang Yihuan and the others had already come many times, so they could investigate the situation from them. The truth was more or less as Ling Han had guessed. One could only pass through here by treading on the threads of regulations. Flight was not possible, as one would be directly pressed to the bottom of the valley. This had the same result as failing to pass on the threads of regulations, and that was one would no longer be able to see the threads of regulations, and would not be able to touch the threads of regulations. This meant that the possibility of crossing the canyon had been lost, and they could only wait for Imperial Path to close, and be thrown out of this mystery realm. Hence, for everyone, there was only one chance. In fact, there were many threads of regulations here, and there were only about 40 people here. It was completely enough for everyone to try. "What are you guys waiting for?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Waiting for you," Shui Qingchang said. "Waiting for me?" Ling Han was surprised. "Don't be so ambiguous. There was nothing going on between us." "We are waiting to compete with you," Heaven Crushing said. "Let's see who can pass first." N. Jing Haoran and the others nodded. "Fuck, you guys are very free, is that really necessary?" Upon further thought, the extent of his freakish talent was already #1 in the world. Thus, every prodigy wanted to defeat him so that their claim of first place would be justified. Otherwise, they would always feel that something was off. Ling Han wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. Everyone was fixated on him now. "All right, let's compete," he said with a smile. In terms of natural talent and comprehension ability, what did he have to fear? The 7 of them each chose a silk thread, and then stepped out with one foot at the same time. The threads of regulations instantly rebounded. This was a manifestation of the willpower of heaven and earth, so how could it be allowed to be touched by others? Thus, one had to resonate with it. Now, though everyone's feet were stepping on the threads of regulations, they were actually all stepping on empty air. They were completely relying on the other foot that was standing on the cliff to maintain their balance. The 7 Genesis world rulers had all surpassed the golden generation. Even such people like Yang Yihuan and Feng Miaoling were slightly inferior. Their divine sense surged, presently rapidly analyzing the regulations. It would depend on who would be the first to take the other step. This would allow them to gain the first opportunity. Merely half a minute later, 7 people stepped out with their second foot at practically the same time. In terms of comprehension ability, none of them was inferior to others. Ling Han nodded internally, as expected of the Genesis world's leaders. Being able to stand out from millions and millions of living beings, their comprehension ability was definitely impressive, and there was nothing to say about it. Thus, it was actually a matter of fate that allowed them to cultivate to a higher level after coming to the new world. And fateful encounters were also related to luck, personality, and even the way one handled matters. For example, if Ling Han could obtain the origin gold, that would be a burst of luck for him. If it really had to be claimed that he was more outstanding than Ding Shu and the others, that might not be the case either. After taking the second step, their speed became faster, and they quickly took the third and fourth steps. However, when they had just reached the 10th step, the threads of regulations began to tremble greatly, causing everyone to stop. They couldn't walk any further or they would definitely fall in. Yang Yihuan and the others, including the golden generations, simply waited. They would wait for the shreds of regulations to stabilize and then walk on it. However, Ling Han and the others didn't think this way. If that was the case, how could one possibly emerge victorious? If one wanted to fight for first place, he would have to do something that others could not. Thus, the 7 of them were all deducing in their minds how they could continue to resonate with the regulations when the threads of regulations were trembling violently. The difficulty level instantly increased by more than a dozen times, or even 100 times. After a long time, Ling Han finally took a step forward. Just as his foot landed, Myriad Dao and the others also raised their feet at almost the same time. Ling Han was still in the lead. Ling Han smiled faintly and took a second step. This was obviously faster than the others because though Ding Shu and the others had raised their feet, they were moving very slowly. The third step, the fourth step, Ling Han's speed became faster and faster. His divine sense had been tempered too perfectly, and this naturally caused his resonance with regulations to become even faster. He left them in the dust, and no one could compare to him. Sigh. Ding Shu and the others all saw this. Aside from feeling gloomy, they could only admit defeat. One could not help but be dissatisfied. The speed of passing this stage had nothing to do with strength. It was completely based on one's comprehension of regulations. And this was closely related to the strength of one's divine sense. In other words, even Ling Han's divine sense was more perfect than theirs. This caused a great blow to Ding Shu and the others. Why were they inferior to Ling Han in every aspect? They were all masters of Genesis World, so why was there such a huge gap between them? It wasn't long before Ling Han surpassed the golden generations that were walking ahead of him. He then caught up to Brother Monkey, Yang Yihuan, and the others. Even if Yang Yihuan and the others hadn't walked the threads of regulations for the first time, the regulations they walked every time were different. They only knew what to do, and aside from that, they actually didn't have any other advantage. Thus, Ling Han surpassed them. After more than an hour, Ling Han finally arrived at the other side of the canyon. At this time, Yang Yihuan, who was walking in front, had only walked 3/4 of the way, and was still quite far from the finishing line. Furthermore, because of his extreme speed, the Imperial Sun's Tao hearts became unstable, and they instantly lost the resonance of regulations, falling directly. Though they would not die, they had also lost the possibility of advancing further. Ling Han decided to wait for Brother Monkey. The two brothers had lost contact since entering the first palace, and it was only now that they met again. Of course, they had to advance together. After ending the Imperial Path adventure, they still had to return to Celestial Sea Planet together to see old acquaintances, family, and friends. The second person to pass was Yang Yihuan, and then the third, fourth, and fifth places were all very close. They were Feng Miaoling, He Luo, and Brother Monkey. In truth, the sixth place had also arrived very quickly. It was Ding Shu and the others that had arrived. Instead, it was those Imperial Sons that had fallen behind. Yang Yihuan and He Luo stared at Ling Han for a while before saying, "If we can obtain the Imperial throne by killing you, then we really won't be able to resist this kind of temptation. Then you all would have to get through Old Sun." Brother Monkey slung the staff forged from saintly material on his shoulder. Looking disdainfully at Yang Yihuan and He Luo, his fighting spirit soaring. "Hee. So you're a descendant of the Battle Saint Emperor," Yang Yihuan said with a smile. Apologies. Brother Monkey ignored him, and only said to Ling Han, "Brother, let's go." "All right." Ling Han nodded, and waved at Ding Shu and the others. "Everyone, I'll take my leave first." Actually, no one was interested in staying here, and there were no natural treasures or incomparable opportunities, so they naturally left as well. Brother Ling, what a coincidence. We meet again." Jing Haoran teased Ling Han, with the spirit that it would definitely kill him if he didn't seek death. "Brother Jing, how have you lived for so long?" Ling Han asked curiously. Jing Haoran propped up his chin in thought. After a while, he said, "It's mainly because of my bearing." Ling Han was rendered speechless. He really wanted to kick him over. Everyone descended from the mountain, and could vaguely see that there was another tall mountain ahead of them. However, when they passed through a massive plain and arrived at the foot of a high mountain, they shockingly discovered that this was not a high mountain, but rather a large tomb. There was a massive stone tablet erected on it, and it was clearly written, "Tomb of the Heavenly Emperor." Everyone inhaled sharply. An emperor's tomb. Was there a great emperor buried here? Furthermore, which great emperor actually dared to claim that he was a heavenly emperor? This sounded even more awesome than a great emperor. Yang Yihuan, Feng Miaoling, and He Luo exchanged a glance. Their pupils contracted, and this was a sign that they felt an indescribable shock. "Brother Yang, do you guys know the origins of the tomb of the Heavenly Emperor?" Jing Haoran couldn't help but ask. Aside from courting death, his curiosity was also overwhelmingly great. Yang Yihuan was still relatively amiable. He pondered for a moment before saying, "The last time I came, there was no Heavenly Emperor's tomb here." "What? Neither have I seen it before." He Luo replied with a shake of his head. Although Feng Miaoling didn't speak, she also shook her head. These three people had all come to the Imperial Path many times, and could be considered regulars, but there was actually a change in the Imperial Path, and even they were not sure about it. How could this not be shocking? The willpower of heaven and earth created Imperial Path, and it could evolve continuously? True, if that was not the case, how could the stone carvings of the past great emperors have appeared on that door on the sea? Because there were a great many great emperors that had only achieved Tao after walking through Imperial Path. This was contrary to the flow of time. Thus, the only explanation was that Imperial Path itself had evolved. So, we have to enter and explore by ourselves, Origin said after a moment of thought. Haha, since we are already here, we will take things as they come. What would we need to fear? Jing Haoran appeared very heroic. Brother Monkey was the most decisive. He directly set off, "Let's go." Ling Han nodded, and walked side by side with Brother Monkey. During this process, none of the Imperial Sons said a word. Even Imperial Sun Ming and Imperial Sun Tian were like roosters that had lost a cockfight, completely losing their temper. Could not be helped. Previously, Imperial Sun Ming had been horribly defeated by Yang Yihuan, and been pursued by Yang Yihuan for countless miles. In the end, he managed to fortunately escape with his life. The shadow in his heart was indescribably heavy, so how could he still dare to seek his own humiliation? However, they all thought to themselves that once they left the Imperial Path, they would definitely ask the saints of their clans to move and kill all these people. Otherwise, the position of Emperor would definitely have nothing to do with them. Brother Monkey's race all had a firm and domineering personality. They would rather break than bend. Even if they encountered danger, they would only face it head-on. He walked into a dark passageway ahead of him, and strode forwards, unafraid. Ling Han followed closely behind. Meanwhile, he spread out his divine sense, and sensed everything in his surroundings. He was extremely careful. If both of them forged ahead stubbornly, that was definitely not a good thing. After walking for a while in the passageway, the path ahead suddenly opened up. The entire mountainside had been hollowed out, and the space was huge. There were 7 colored flames rising, waterfalls soaring into the skies, and magnificent divine metal was glowing, making it seem a strange and peculiar scene. "Be careful," Brother Monkey suddenly said. Then he suddenly raised his staff and pointed it straight ahead. "Who goest there? Show yourself." Ling Han focused his gaze, and saw a hazy shadow ahead of him. However, he couldn't see clearly whether it was a human or a demon at all. "Little monkey, you are quite hot-tempered." An old voice rang out, and that shadow also walked out. When it came close enough, that layer of haziness gradually faded, revealing an old man. Ling Han couldn't help but give a and said, "Senior, it's you." It was the old man who had given him the time wine at the cemetery. When he woke up, there was no sign of the old man. He had not thought that he would appear here again. The elder chuckled, and said, "Young man, you're truly fortunate." Brother Monkey scratched his head, then shouted again, "Hey, who exactly are you?" As for me, a look of reminiscence appeared on the elder's face, and he said, "My name is Han Yun, the Tombkeeper." It really was him. Previously, they had seen him in the Tomb of Time, and now it was the tomb of the Heavenly Emperor. "Senior Han." Ling Han clasped his hands in greeting. "You should have come here long ago. May I know what you can teach us?" At this moment, Ding Shu, Origin, and the others also walked over from behind. When they discovered that there was actually an elder here, they were all shocked. It should be known that there was a relative age limit for entering into the Imperial Path. It was not just anyone that could enter. Thus, this old geezer looked to be quite old, and whether it was in absolute or relative terms of age, how could he possibly appear in this space? Could it be that this was a native? Han Yun smiled and said, Don't worry. I do not belong here. I can only see everything, and cannot take anything. Otherwise, the heavens would not spare me." Hiss! What did that mean? Could it be that he was not a native of this place, but rather an outsider? However, he did not conform to the rules of entry into the Imperial Path for relatively young people. Instead, he had used some unknown method to enter. Thus, he could not break the rules and snatch the fated opportunity from the young people. Senior, is there really a great emperor buried here? Ling Han asked. Han Yun shook his head. There is no corpse of a great emperor here. However, there really is an opportunity related to the great emperor here. I just don't know which of you would be able to obtain it. His words sent a wave of commotion through the masses. As long as it was related to the great emperor, then no matter what kind of great opportunity it was still astonishing. Go on. I'm also waiting for you guys to open the imperial path to follow you out, Han Yun said with a smile. After all, I've deceived the damn heavens for so long. If I break the rules again, it's really possible that I will be struck to death. These words sounded frightening because how many people were qualified to be struck to death by the heavens? Even if he broke through to become a saint, the heaven and earth would only cause internal demons to descend on him. Unless he had done something unforgivable, then only would heavenly Tao send down a lightning punishment to erase him. Thus, a person that could be erased by heavenly Tao must be overwhelmingly powerful. Han Yun fell silent after saying this, and his figure became hazy again. No one could see through him. Even venerate tier elites couldn't see through, so just how powerful was the old geezer? A saint? No one dared to disturb him. In an era when there was no emperor in the world, saints were naturally respected. Who dared to disrespect them? They circled around Han Yun, one after another, and continued onwards. There were no mechanisms or restrictions here. Everything was very calm, as if it was just an ordinary cave. However, after walking for a while, the situation changed. The resistance came again. This resistance was not absolute, but rather differed based on cultivation level. For example, though Brother Monkey was a venerate tier, he did not have an easier time compared to Ling Han. The pressure he endured was 100 times stronger, or even 1,000 times stronger. However, after advancing 300 meters, even someone as strong as Brother Monkey had no choice but to stop. This resistance was already so strong that even he could not advance any further. However, with Brother Monkey's domineering nature, how could he be willing to stop just like that? He gave a loud shout and channeled the metal rod in his hand, forcibly slicing through the obstructive force, and advanced once more. His ferocity was unreasonable, and he actually forcibly advanced another 30 meters. However, this time he had really reached his limit. No matter how fast Brother Monkey brandished the metal rod, he could not advance the slightest bit further. This made Brother Monkey cry out in anger. He opened his mouth and bared his sharp teeth, as if he wanted to bite an invisible opponent to death. With a thought, Ling Han summoned the Primal Chaos Extreme Lightning Tower, planning to protect him and Brother Monkey as they continued to advance. However, this time even the pseudo-imperial weapon was useless. It was not effective against the resistance at all. Then what should he do? Ling Han hurriedly shook his hands. Boom! Destructive energy surged, and the obstructive force instantly disappeared. He couldn't help but feel surprised. He had only channeled the destructive energy in a gamble, but the effects were far better than he had imagined. He had actually pushed back all the resistance. Unfortunately, this destructive energy could only protect him. It itself was a deadly weapon, and could not possibly protect Brother Monkey as well. Seeing that Ling Han was advancing without any hindrance, Brother Monkey nodded. Brother, you go first. Ling Han hesitated for a moment, then replied, all right. No matter what he gained, he would share it with Brother Monkey. He strode forwards, and behind him, Ding Shu, Heaven Crushing, and the others also channeled the destructive energy, moving freely under this resistance. On the other hand, Myriad Tao, Origin, and the others, though they too were masters of the Genesis world, but because they had not cultivated the destructive energy, they could only sigh helplessly. After walking for over 10 minutes, the obstructive force suddenly disappeared. A forest of stone pillars appeared ahead of them. They were densely packed together, and there were indescribably many of them. Furthermore, every single stone pillar was still glowing, and their color varied. Where exactly was the great opportunity that Han Yun spoke of that was related to the great emperor? Ling Han suddenly faltered. He had a feeling that something was summoning him. It was hard to say whether this was a human or something else. In short, he had established a connection with him, which also provided him with a vague direction. He looked towards Ding Shu and the others and saw that these 4 people were also looking towards the others. By the looks of it, everyone was being summoned by that being. A treasure left behind by a great emperor? But why them? It should be known that this tomb of the heavenly emperor had not even existed the last time it was opened. This was proven by Yang Yihuan and the others. Then, from this deduction, it was very possible that this so-called heavenly emperor was referring to the previous great emperor. Who was this great emperor? There were no historical records, and they only knew that there was indeed such an existence. The problem was, what relation did this great emperor have with the destructive energy? What did this have to do with the Genesis world? If it was unrelated, then why was it that only the Genesis world's masters could cultivate destructive energy, and only they could walk here? If they found the treasures left behind by this great emperor, would they be able to unravel all the secrets? Everyone moved, heading towards the depths of the stone forest. After walking for a while, they gradually stopped. That was because that kind of feeling was intermittent and incredibly weak. During this process, Ling Han discovered that everyone's perception of that unknown existence was different. He should be the strongest because that connection had not been severed all this while, and the next strongest was Ding Shu. Was this determined by the strength of the destructive energy that one had mastered? See, Ling Han had mastered 8 corners of the destructive energy spirit diagram, and next was Ding Shu. This sensitivity was completely proportional to this. A smile spread across Ling Han's face. By the looks of it, this treasure left behind by the great emperor was most likely his. He sped up, shuttling through the stone forest. After turning left and right, he soon threw everyone off his tail. In this place, the stone forest was densely packed, which greatly affected visibility. One couldn't see very far at all, and the light rays they emitted had the effect of obstructing divine sense. Thus, one could throw others off their tail with a few steps. Ling Han walked faster and faster. His position in the lead might not be secure, so he had to hurry. He walked here and there, circled here and there. This stone forest was astonishingly huge. Furthermore, though Ling Han's sense of that mysterious existence was slightly stronger, that was only in relative terms. There were a great many times that he still had to stop and distinguish the direction. Hence, his speed actually could not be considered very fast, but he was definitely ahead of the others. 3 days later, Ling Han discovered that the feeling of connection was strengthening. Did this mean that he was already very close to the treasure that the great emperor had left behind? Ling Han couldn't help but feel excited, and sped up. After about half a day, he walked out of the stone forest. In front of him stood a massive stone tablet. Ling Han swept his gaze over the surroundings, and only then did he discover that he hadn't actually walked out of the stone forest. The only reason for this misconception was because the area around the stone tablet had become empty. In truth, he was still inside the stone forest, but in some unknown corner. This stone tablet was extraordinary. Ling Han walked over. His eyes swept over the surroundings, and his heart suddenly beat wildly. This was actually the 9th corner of the destructive energy spirit diagram. It should be known that the 8 corners of the spirit diagram had been written on some unknown beast hide. But now, the 9th corner of the destructive energy spirit diagram had been inscribed on the stone tablet. No wonder he felt a resonance. So that was the case. Could it be that the destructive energy was created by the great emperor of the last era? This was too shocking. Destructive energy had surpassed 9 stars, and even the great emperors of the past had never come into contact with it before. No wonder this place could be called the tomb of the heavenly emperor. The previous great emperor was indeed awesome, stunning all eternity. The problem was, what did this have to do with him? There was definitely a link between the Genesis world and the great emperor of the last era, but what exactly was it? Ling Han was curious, but he couldn't figure it out. However, he immediately pushed this question back into his mind. The most important thing now was not to know the reason, but rather to cultivate this ninth corner of the destructive energy spirit diagram, reaching consummate level. He immediately began to read. The millions and millions of dimensions in his body immediately vibrated as well, as if they were resonating, but also seemed to be cheering. Something that he clearly could not understand was forcefully absorbed by him, and he actually knew what to do. This feeling was really strange. However, he had already experienced it 8 times, so it didn't matter if he experienced it again. In just half a day, Ling Han had already mastered this ninth corner of the spirit diagram. Destructive energy surged, burning all over Ling Han's body. Energy that was even denser than darkness exuded an indescribable pressure. Quang! A sudden clap of thunder rang out in the heaven and earth. Endless tribulation clouds appeared above Ling Han's head, layering on top of each other. Ling Han couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. Previously, the heavens' calamity had only caused an internal demon to descend, but now, it seemed like there really was divine lightning that was about to strike down. This was no joke. If heavenly Tao was going to kill, even a saint's only path would be death. The problem was that heavenly Tao had its own rules to play by, so it definitely couldn't act recklessly, unless one did something super great that destroyed the regulations of heaven and earth. I've only mastered the complete destructive energy. Is there any need for you to be so furious? Destructive energy was really no joke. This was an existence that surpassed all high-level energies. However, he was actually going to be struck by lightning? This was too much, wasn't it? Quang! A bolt of lightning struck down, indescribably fast. So what if it was Ling Han? He was completely unable to dodge. This was comparable to the attack of a saint, or perhaps even stronger. However, Ling Han discovered that he wasn't injured at all. The heavenly Tao would also mess around with people, playing around? Quang! 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 One bolt of lightning followed another, striking madly at Ling Han. No, it wasn't just Ling Han. Even the stone tablet was targeted, forcibly disintegrating and vanishing without a trace. Ling Han was curious. Why was it that when it struck a rock, the rock would suffer a destructive blow, but when it struck him, he was completely unscathed? Furthermore, wasn't Imperial Path formed by heaven and earth? Since you don't want others to cultivate destructive energy, why have you left it here? It had established the tomb of the heavenly emperor, and now it was sending down a heaven's calamity to destroy it. Wasn't that an unnecessary action? Hong! 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 The divine lightning struck madly. It came and went quickly, and in less than 2 minutes the lightning had stopped striking down, and the thunderclouds had also dispersed. Was it just destroying the stone tablet to destroy evidence? Ling Han looked inside himself. After being struck so many times by the heaven's calamity, though he was unscathed, he kept feeling that something was strange. This investigation gave him a shock, and his expression also became strange. He really hadn't suffered any injuries, but it didn't mean that nothing had changed. That was because on the fruit of cultivation in his mind, there shockingly appeared multiple black chains. Fuck! What the hell was this? Ling Han waved his hands and feet, and a terrifying power surged. Regulations surged, and his battle prowess was not affected in the slightest. What exactly was the use of these black chains? This was caused by the heaven's calamity striking him. Ling Han didn't think that it was just for show. It must have some use that I don't know about. It's just that it hasn't been shown yet. However, the heavenly Tao was angered because of this, and sent down lightning to strike me. From this, it is clear that this should not be anything good, right? Ling Han rubbed his nose. Cultivating destructive energy to its full state was a great thing, but it also seemed to have planted a hidden danger for him. Whatever, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. It's useless even if I think about it now. He stood up, and just as he was about to leave, he felt the ground beneath his feet tremble loudly. What was going on? With a loud bang, the whole space cracked open. Ling Han was instantly swept out by an irresistible force, and in this process, he even saw others. For example, Ding Shu, Brother Monkey, the Golden Generation, and even Song Lan, who had stayed in North Prosperity City. Could it be that imperial path had already ended? Ling Han saw that Yang Yihuan, He Luo, and Feng Miaoling all looked confused. From this, it could be seen that imperial path definitely did not end here in the past. But now, some kind of change had taken place, and it had come to an abrupt stop. Space split apart again, and everyone fell out, one after another. This place was the same moon planet. That massive stone door was slowly closing. It was too eye-catching, and no one would be able to see wrongly. All of a sudden, the saints and venerate tears that had stayed behind all moved, searching for their descendants and heirs. Now that he was here, Ling Han could control the ley lines again. He used the earth chi as his eyes and ears, and after sensing for a while, he discovered that the Nine Mountains Saint wasn't here. True, the old man didn't know that he had entered the imperial path from the netherworld. This passageway was too hidden, and there should be very few people who knew about it. Hence, it was really normal that the old man did not wait for him here. Ling Han, an earth-shattering voice rang out. A saint flew into a rage, and directly turned into a giant that was millions and millions of meters tall. His head was the size of a planet, and looked directly at Ling Han. Damn it! Another saint manifested a projection, which also transformed into an indomitable giant. There was also a third, a fourth, and one after another. The saints used their great power to turn into beings millions and millions of meters tall. In this way, no matter which corner of same moon planet Ling Han was hiding in, they would be able to kill him with a light grab. These were all saints of the imperial clans. They had already found out through the divine sense transmission of their imperial sons that Ling Han had killed a few more imperial sons. Furthermore, his freakishness was enough to threaten the golden generation. This boy definitely could not be allowed to live. Boom! A saint was far too domineering, and they didn't even give Ling Han a chance to defend himself. A large hand descended from the sky, slamming down at Ling Han. When the saint moved, the venerate tear could only dodge. Furthermore, he had to tear a rip into space and flee at the first instant. If he was slightly slower, the void would also be implicated, and he would still die. The saint was the embodiment of the regulations of heaven and earth. He was indescribably powerful. Ling Han was only a 3-star sect master, and didn't even have the chance to dodge. He delivered a palm strike, and the entire same moon planet trembled violently. 1/3 of the planet caved in. Had Ling Han died? He had definitely died. A saint had moved, and directly hit him. If he still did not die, what justice was there left in this world? This scene caused a great many imperial sons, including Ding Shu, Yang Yihuan, and the others, to be extremely surprised. That incredibly freakish prodigy who was aiming straight for the throne actually died just like that? So calm? Such a worthless death? So simple? But upon further thought, a saint had already moved, so what sect master would be spared? However, they were still slightly unable to accept this. On their way here, Ling Han had created far too many miracles. Thus, even though it was a saint that had done this, they still felt a little uncertain. They wanted to search for Ling Han's corpse for further confirmation. But with a single strike from a saint, everything was shattered, and only the powerful martial intent of the saint was boiling. Even if Ling Han had left behind slivers of his remnant soul, they would still be completely destroyed by the martial intent of the saint. Why did he have to kill so thoroughly? Couldn't he leave behind some remnant soul to extract Ling Han's memories? In that case, it would be clear why Ling Han was so powerful. But when they saw who the saint that had moved was, everyone understood why he had done so. That was the fire-leaving saint of the Fire Cloud Imperial clan. The golden generation of their clan had died, the silver generation had died, and the ordinary imperial sons had died even earlier. It could be said that there was completely no possibility for their clan to produce another great emperor. Thus, since they could not produce an emperor, they naturally did not want the other imperial clans to take advantage of them either. They would directly kill Ling Han and destroy everyone's hopes of obtaining the secret to Ling Han's strength. Holy fuck! A great many saints were cursing internally. With how murderous they were, it was naturally necessary for them to kill Ling Han. But at the same time, they too wanted to obtain Ling Han's secret. However, this didn't matter. Aside from Ling Han, there was also Ding Shu, Yang Yihuan, and the others. You guys. These saints looked towards Ding Shu and the others, their eyes baleful and menacing. Hee hee. What do you guys want to do? One after another, saints appeared, similarly turning into giants that were millions and millions of meters tall, protecting Ding Shu, Yang Yihuan, and the others. If you don't want your clan to be exterminated, you had best behave, the old saint who had escorted He Luo over said. The blood parasol above his head trembled slightly, exuding an incredibly terrifying aura. Let's go. These saints tore a rip into space, one after another, and left with Ding Shu and the others. Hey! Give me back my brother's life. Brother Monkey shouted loudly. His right hand held the saint-level metal rod, while his left hand held the primal chaos extreme lightning tower. His face was filled with fury. He was completely unafraid of the saint, and directly charged over. None of the saints made a move. Instead, they dodged. For the sake of the battle, Saint Emperor, I won't lower myself to your level. These saints tore open space one after another, then grabbed their juniors and left. They didn't seize even the pseudo-imperial weapon. For the sake of the battle, Saint Emperor, the so-called reason was only superficial. The real reason was naturally fearing that the battle Saint Emperor had not died. Then, if his only descendant, Brother Monkey, was killed, wouldn't the battle Saint Emperor go crazy? In the past, this great emperor was renowned for his toughness and ferocity. He had a hot-tempered personality, and if he could resolve things through battle, he would definitely not waste time on words. Though innumerable years had passed since the era of the battle Saint Emperor, the great emperor had gone to the edge of the universe to seek immortality, and no one knew whether he had died or not. That was the great emperor. He had ruled a whole era, and he was so powerful that even saints couldn't imagine it. It was extremely likely that he could perform a miracle. Thus, even if there was only a sliver of a chance, these saints would not dare to do anything to Brother Monkey. Brother Monkey did not pursue. Instead, he immediately calmed down. The primal chaos extreme lightning tower in his hands was naturally given to him by Ling Han. He didn't flip out at the first instant because he received Ling Han's divine sense transmission. Xiao, he streaked through the universe, and very soon, grabbed a broken piece of stone. This was a piece of the same planet that had been shattered by the fire-leaving saint. He immediately put it away, then tore a rip into space and quickly left. After traveling through a considerable number of galaxies, Brother Monkey finally stopped. Xiao, Ling Han's figure appeared. Previously, he had shrunk his body and adhered it to that rock. Before the saint had made his move, Ling Han had already done a few things, because he knew that he had killed a great many imperial sons. The moment he exited the imperial path, he would be bombarded by the saints of the imperial clans. Firstly, he handed the primal chaos extreme lightning tower over to Brother Monkey and quickly related his thoughts through divine sense. Secondly, he channeled the purple calamity grains in his body, forming a protective layer. In this manner, the saint's attack was completely dispersed by the purple calamity grains. Meanwhile, Ling Han took advantage of the opening to shrink his body and attach himself onto a rock. With the shockwave created the remaining power of the saint's attack, he rushed into space. He tried his best to suppress his life force, and added with the fact that the martial intent of a saint was spreading everywhere in space, there was no way to detect his aura at all. Hence, going by his inherent thinking, if he was struck by the saint's attack, he would definitely be deader than dead, and not even his soul fragment would be found. As for why the primal chaos extreme lightning tower had to be given to Brother Monkey, it was forged from origin gold, so it couldn't possibly be damaged by a saint. Thus, if he disappeared and the primal chaos extreme lightning tower also disappeared, that would be a flaw in the deception. Thus, he needed Brother Monkey's cooperation. In this way, everyone would think that Ling Han had died. These bastards! Brother Monkey was still extremely furious. If it weren't for the saint's suppression, Old Sun would have gone to their lair and turned them upside down. Ling Han smiled faintly. When we are a little stronger, we will go and take a look at the Imperial clan. Haha, just what Old Sun wants, Brother Monkey said with a smile. He loved battle the most. Have you misunderstood something? Ling Han suddenly thought of something. When he said he was going to visit the imperial clans, he meant something like ambushing them secretly, robbing, and so on. He had no intention to barge in forcefully. After all, they were all protected by the imperial weapon and the great emperor-level formation. If they didn't become emperor, then even saints wouldn't dare to barge in with the imperial weapon. Brother Monkey, you have to take it easy. If you want to forcibly break through to the imperial clan, that really could only be done after becoming emperor. They first managed to contact the Nine Mountain Saint and informed him that Ling Han wasn't dead. Then they headed toward Celestial Sea Planet. In the meantime, Ling Han taught Phoenix Wing's divine flight to Brother Monkey. If there was fortune, they would naturally enjoy it together. Even with a Venerate tier to lead the way because the distance was too far, it still took them more than 2 months to finally arrive at Celestial Sea Planet. At this moment, the Dark North Nation's name was known throughout the world. There was no other reason for this. After cultivating in seclusion for many years, Chun Fengyan had finally broken through to sect master level. Yo! Brat Yen has finally become a sect master. Brother Monkey sighed. More than 2,000 years ago, this brat was still following old Sun around, half-naked. They directly headed to the Imperial Palace, but they both disguised themselves. This was especially the case for Ling Han. He had successfully disguised himself as having died, so he could take advantage of this opportunity to secretly grow stronger. He naturally didn't want to expose his identity. They did not go through the main doors. If they did, they would still have to ask someone to announce their arrival. How troublesome would that be? The two of them directly flew above the Imperial Palace, then searched for the strongest aura. It wasn't long before they found the location of Chun Fengyan. With a whoosh, they descended from the sky. Chun Fengyan's expression changed drastically. This was because he hadn't noticed how the two of them had arrived before him. A great enemy. Chun Fengyan was presently a sect master. Even if he had just broken through not too long ago, he could still be considered a great elite. Yet now, two strangers had appeared soundlessly in front of him. Just how terrifying was this? And there were two of them at that. He did not say another word, and moved directly. As the saying goes, the one to make the first move wins. Brat Yen, are you disrespecting your elders? Brother Monkey said with a humph. He reached over and grabbed Chun Fengyan's wrist, rendering him immobile. Chun Fengyan was instantly startled. There was only one person in this world who would call him Brat Yen. Uncle Monkey? He looked at Brother Monkey, both shocked and delighted. It is your grandpa's son. Brother Monkey nodded. Fuck. Chun Fengyan couldn't help but curse in his mind. You're my uncle, not my grandfather. Brother Monkey's catchphrase was very aggravating. And this is... Chun Fengyan looked towards Ling Han. He could sense that the aura that was vaguely exuding from Ling Han was also the aura of a sect master, and was even stronger than him. Thus, even in his wildest dreams, he would not link this to Ling Han. What a joke! It was absolutely impossible, all right? This is your Uncle Ling, Brother Monkey said with a glare. His teeth bared, revealing his ferocious nature. Ling? Uncle Ling? Chun Fengyan was confused. Why was there another uncle? Ling Han cracked a smile. Brat Yen, you have forgotten me so quickly? This voice was Ling Han. Chun Fengyan was instantly dumbfounded, his mouth wide open. How was this possible? He could think of anyone, but definitely wouldn't think of Ling Han. At that time, he was already a spirit transformation true lord, but what about Ling Han? He hadn't even stepped into Celestial Path, and the gap between them could be said to be endless. Now, he had advanced into sect master level. In terms of time, it was already very fast, less than 100 years, but in comparison, Ling Han had taken 6 consecutive steps on the Celestial Path. Wasn't that a joke? He could already be considered a prodigy. Then what was Ling Han? Pa! Brother Monkey gave Chin Feng a smack on the back of the head and said, What are you standing there for? Hurry up and greet him. Don't you know how to respect seniority? Chun Fengyan was extremely depressed. At first, he had thought that after he had advanced into the level of sect master, he could be awesome for a while. Who would have thought that Brother Monkey had also advanced further, and was still completely suppressing him? Furthermore, Ling Han had also advanced to the level of being his equal. Even if he had experienced great ups and downs in his life, his heart was still slightly unable to accept it. "Are you really Ling Han?" he asked. "As true as I can be," Ling Han said with a nod and a smile. He could understand Chun Fengyan's astonishment. According to the cultivation progress of most people, even if they could advance to the level of sect master, they would all be in their twilight years. Meanwhile, those like Chun Fengyan were definitely prodigies who had broken through in their prime. But compared to him, that was practically the speed of a snail. Could not be helped. Who was Ling Han competing with? The Golden Generation, as well as Yang Yihuan, and other old prodigies from who knew how many years ago, as well as the Genesis world's rulers. This forced him to only have the choice of advancing bravely, and he could not stop for even a moment. "Are you really a sect master?" Chun Fengyan asked dumbly. Actually, he could sense Ling Han's aura, but it was really too shocking. He had to confirm it again. "That's right." Ling Han nodded again. Chun Fengyan sighed and said, "I cultivated for so many years before finally breaking through to the level of sect master. You haven't even reached the level of 100 years, and you're already on par with me." This was really a blow to his pride. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Wrong. We're not neck and neck. I'm a 3-star sect master. I'm more powerful than you." "Pooh." Chun Fengyan felt as if his heart had been stabbed a few more times, causing him to feel even worse. "Is it really good for you to bully me like this?" "Ha ha ha." Brother Monkey laughed loudly, then said, "Brat Yen, is there anything that you need old son's help for?" "What else?" Brother Monkey turned around and asked. He was the most straightforward in his actions and hated being sloppy. 1016. "Can't you be a little more polite?" Chun Fengyan asked in frustration. This Uncle Monkey was far too straightforward. Thankfully, he hadn't been pretending to be polite just then. Otherwise, he would have definitely been angered to death. "Not for the moment," Chun Fengyan said with a shake of his head. "I'm still accumulating power. When the time is ripe, I'll lead the celestial sea planet to become independent and rebuild the Chun clan's majestic empire." "All right." Brother Monkey nodded and said to Ling Han, "Brother, let's go." "Uncle Monkey," Chun Fengyan hurriedly shouted. "You're leaving just like that? What else?" Brother Monkey turned around and asked. He was the most straightforward in his actions and hated being sloppy. "Can't you be a little more polite?" Chun Fengyan asked in frustration. This Uncle Monkey was far too straightforward. Thankfully, he hadn't been pretending to be polite just then. Otherwise, he would have definitely been angered to death. Brother Monkey rolled his eyes and directly strode away. Ling Han didn't leave. Instead, he asked with a serious expression, "How are my descendants and friends?" "Very good," Chun Fengyan said with a nod. He didn't put on any airs. Firstly, Ling Han was his senior, so he had to admit this fact no matter what. Secondly, Ling Han's cultivation level was actually higher than his, so he also had to maintain his respect for him. "However, your daughter and son-in-law seem to have left Celestial Sea Planet and gone to some academy on Moonlight Planet," he added. Ling, she had gone to the Moonlight Planet? The current Moonlight Planet was no longer the Azure Dragon Majestic Empire's territory, but a subsidiary planet under the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's rule. However, it was once the center of a majestic empire, after all, so the Moonlight Planet's martial arts level was still one of the top few in the nearby galaxies. It was normal for Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing to go to the Moonlight Planet to cultivate martial arts. After all, the cultivation conditions there were definitely much better than here. Ling Han nodded before waving at Chun Fengyan and leaving. "Chun Fengyan, are you guys here just to strike a blow to my pride? It wasn't easy for me to advance to the rank of sect master, and I thought that I would be able to show off my potential. Now, however, Brother Monkey has advanced to the rank of Venerate tier, and he's still superior to me. Moreover, Ling Han is even more exaggerated. He has surpassed him, though he had a late start, and he's now a 3-star sect master. He was a negative example of failure. This was too sad." Ling Han first returned to his hometown to visit his old friends that he had brought out of the Genesis world. Meanwhile, Descendants like Ling Jianxue and others had stayed on Celestial Sea Planet. With Chen Fengyan taking care of them, he was very at ease. Seeing Ling Han return, everyone in the Ling clan, including Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable, Heavenly Venerate Wu Lu and so on, were all overjoyed. Ling Han introduced Brother Monkey to everyone, and briefly related his experiences over the years. Then, he took out a large amount of alchemical pills and natural treasures, and distributed them to everyone. For him, this was already completely useless, but for Ling Jianxue and the others it was incredibly precious. The fact that these people could come to the new world meant that they had at least cultivated to first-tier Heavenly Venerate in the Genesis world. They had already proven their talent. Thus, after coming to the new world, their cultivation progress was also very rapid. The one who had improved the fastest was Ji Wuming, and he was already in Cauldron Forging tier. However, in the past, Ji Wuming was still Ling Han's strongest competitor, and now this gap was already extremely wide. Ling Han made some queries. Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing entered the Silver Moon Academy on Moonlight Planet. They had only gone there 3 years ago. His daughter was dear to him, so Ling Han decided go alone to visit his daughter on Moonlight Planet. He would then plan his next course of action. There was naturally no need for Brother Monkey to accompany him to visit his daughter. Ling Han tore open a rip into the void and headed towards the Moonlight Planet. After reaching the level of Sect Master, he possessed the ability to tear open the void. However, he discovered that this was not as fast as transformation. Couldn't be helped. He was only a Sect Master. After reaching the Venerate tier, his speed of traversing through the void would definitely be faster than the transformation. However, he had already entered into the void, so he couldn't retreat. If he came out halfway, it would be even more impossible. How could there be a transformation for him to use? Thus, after spending half a month's time, Ling Han finally arrived at Moonlight Planet. Things had changed. Ling Han stood in front of a large city, raising his eyes to look at the city wall. A strong feeling of emotion rose up in his heart. The first time he came here, he hadn't even stepped into Celestial Path. But now, he was already Sect Master level, enough to sweep aside all opposition in the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire. This Majestic Empire didn't have a Venerate tier elite on standby. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone to so much trouble to draw out the old Venerate tier elite from the Azure Dragon Majestic Empire with formations and killing weapons. Even so, the Venerate tier elite still managed to escape, leaving a hidden danger. In the blink of an eye, almost 100 years had passed. Ordinary people should have almost forgotten about the Azure Dragon Majestic Empire. Ling Han sighed ruefully for a while, and then entered into the city. He naturally changed his appearance and even retracted his aura. With the help of the soul-forming technique, even Venerate tier elites might not be able to recognize him. What more when it was this kind of remote little planet, where not many people might know who he was. Ling Han asked around for the location of the Silver Moon Academy, then used the star steps. When he reappeared, he had already arrived in another city. He slowed down. He was only going to visit his daughter. There was no need for him to engage in battle. As he strolled, he arrived at the Silver Moon Academy. There were so many people. He was just about to ask when he was forced forward by the people behind him. Hurry up! Hurry up! The registration deadline is today. Hurry up! The people behind shouted as they pushed and shoved. The registration was over? Ling Han followed the crowd and entered the academy. As it turned out, the Silver Moon Academy was recruiting students recently, and today was the deadline. Thus, those who had come from far away were naturally anxious. No matter what, they had to first register themselves, and as for whether they could pass or not, that would be a matter for the future. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, and he couldn't help but smile. Fine, then he would test himself into the academy and be classmates with his daughter for a few days. He obediently followed the others to register. In terms of information, he naturally filled in the words, Han Lin. That night, they all made do in the plaza of the academy. Cultivators were cultivators, after all. If they couldn't even endure this little bit of hardship, then what was the point of cultivating? On the morning of the second day, everyone who had registered had gathered. They had registered, and next it was the academy's turn to choose from them. The academy recruited disciples based on natural talent and character. If one's natural talent in martial arts was inferior, that would be a waste of resources and time, and if one's character was inferior, that would be nurturing a future disaster. However, it was very difficult to judge one's character with one's eyes. Furthermore, one could also disguise one's character. As the saying goes, time reveals one's true character. It was definitely not something that could be determined in a few days. I heard that the quota for recruitment this time is extremely limited. Only 100. Only 100? Sigh. Then I definitely have no chance. Those who were well-informed were whispering the information they had found out, which caused a heated discussion. However, no one gave up. They had come filled with hope, so it was naturally impossible that they would run away with their tails between their legs without even competing. And what if? This time, a few super geniuses will also be coming, such as Ding Liang, Yi Zimo, and Fang Feibai. They are all famous. What? Even these people are here? Hey. Why are they joining us? Shouldn't they have been specially recruited by the academy? Hee. I heard that it was Ding Liang that insisted on participating in the fair selection to prove his own strength. With his actions, Yi Zimo and Fang Feibai also gave up the spots for special recruitment and insisted on participating in the selection together. Oh no! There were only 100 spots in the first place, and now there are 3 less spots. Everyone sighed. They knew themselves well. No matter what, they could not possibly be a match for the 3 of them. Let's just look at the divisions. As long as we're not in the same division as them, we still have a chance of qualifying. It wasn't long before a teacher from the academy came over to announce the rules of the tournament. The registrants were divided into 10 divisions, and 20 people would qualify from each division. The top 5 from each division would be directly accepted into the academy, while the remaining would compete for the remaining half of the spots. Next, it was time for the divisions. Ding Liang, Yi Zimo, and Fang Feibai had all become seeded competitors without any doubt, and would definitely not be assigned to the same area. Furthermore, there were also some other young prodigies that were well known, and they were evenly distributed among the divisions. After others were announced to be in the same division as Ding Liang and the others, they all wore distressed expressions. This meant that there would be 1 less spot for them to enter directly into the academy. It wasn't long before everyone finished splitting up. Ling Han was relatively lucky. He didn't have any particularly famous people in his division, so about 400 people in this group were all rubbing their hands in anticipation, preparing to go all out and fight for the top 5 spots. I, Qian Bing, have reserved a place. A young man laughed loudly. Qian Bing? Who is it? Ah, it seems to be a very famous prodigy from Puan Town. He's just from a small town, so what's so impressive about him? Everyone was discussing spiritedly, and Qian Bing was proud. He provoked everyone and said, "If anyone is dissatisfied, I will beat him into submission now. I'm not convinced." Immediately, someone rushed up, but Qian Bing only used 1 move, and that person was knocked down onto the ground. Hiss, everyone was stunned. Whether this was an elite or not, they would know once they made their move. This Qian Bing could not be underestimated. Seeing that he had intimidated everyone, Qian Bing couldn't help but feel proud of himself. Previously, he had been hiding all this while, and that was why he had gained some fame. His aim was to amaze the world with a single feat. Otherwise, he was sure that his fame would definitely not be inferior to Yi Zimo and the others. He looked towards Ling Han, and saw that this person was completely unperturbed, as if he had not taken that stunning feat from him to heart at all. Qian Bing was instantly displeased, but before he could fly into a rage, the teachers of the academy came over, warning them not to make a move in private. Otherwise, they would all be disqualified from the tournament. This caused Qian Bing to not dare to act recklessly, but the gaze he directed at Ling Han was already filled with animosity. Everyone saw this and all sighed ruefully for Ling Han, thinking that this was really an undeserved calamity, and Qian Bing was really too petty. Next, it was time to test natural talent, which would be carried out division by division. Ling Han casually dealt with this. His aptitude wasn't too bad, nor was it too good. It was quite standard, and in Qian Bing's case, his natural talent in martial arts was actually the highest grade of A. Of course, this was only the judgment standard of the Silver Moon Academy. If it was Ling Han, this kind of aptitude would just barely qualify him to enter Spirit Transformation True Lord level. After Qian Bing's test was over, he showed Ling Han an arrogant smile. Humph! Ling Han merely smiled faintly. With his present height, would he take a minor cultivator that had just stepped into Celestial Path to heart? If he was displeased, he could just crush him to death with a single finger. After the first round of the test, everyone was given a mark. Qian Bing took first place while Ling Han was stuck in the 20s. If he was not careful, he would be eliminated, but if he improved any further, he would be able to pass. The second test was comprehension. The teacher from the academy was teaching a sword technique on the spot. Whoever could accurately repeat the performance would be able to pass, so the shorter the time, the better. With Ling Han's strength and comprehension ability, he could use this kind of sword technique after seeing it once. However, he didn't want to show off and only deduced his path of martial arts in his mind. In a short while, Qian Bing stepped forward to practice. Though there was a slight error, he still passed the test. He was extremely pleased with himself. He had gotten first place in 2 consecutive rounds, so he should be the undisputed #1 in this division. When he looked at Ling Han again, a cold smile curled up the corners of his lips. Whether Ling Han would be chosen by the academy or not, he would make him suffer greatly. The second, the third, people gradually learnt the sword technique and passed. When about 20 people had passed the test, Ling Han also walked forwards. Using his foot to raise his sword, he very casually cast the sword technique. This naturally meant that he had successfully passed the test. He did it casually, but that teacher from the academy was shocked. That was because he discovered that Ling Han's use of this sword technique was really too proficient. He was even more proficient than he was. Furthermore, there was a small weakness in the sword technique. That was caused by his habit, and could not be changed no matter what. The others also copied this shortcoming, and only Ling Han was an exception. He had corrected this shortcoming. Was this a coincidence? Or was it that this boy's natural talent in cultivation was astonishing, and he had taken the initiative to make up for it? He couldn't help but take a second look at Ling Han. Qian Bing also discovered this, and couldn't help but feel angry. He was the first to pass, and he didn't see how much attention this teacher had to him. Why would he focus his attention on an insignificant person? Qian Bing naturally did not dare to resent the teacher of the academy, and this debt was once again placed on Ling Han's tab. After 2 rounds, a considerable number of people were sighing. They had fallen behind the top 30, so even if they achieved a very good result in the last round, it would be useless. They would not be able to improve their ranking at all. The third round, and also the last round, was actual battle. You guys can choose your opponents and then battle. I will grade you based on your performance, the teacher from the academy said. Everyone hurriedly went to form their own teams, looking for those that were evenly matched. Otherwise, they would definitely be asking for trouble. You, Qian Bing pointed at Ling Han, be my opponent. This was really a good opportunity. Ling Han smiled faintly. Sure. This was a rainy day, so there was nothing better to do. Those who have found a good opponent can come over now and start first, the teacher from the academy said. I'll go first. Qian Bing called out loudly and walked out. Ling Han was very casual as he walked out as well. He's done for. In the first place, this guy was only ranked around 20th. At first, he had a chance of qualifying, but he would definitely be no match for Qian Bing. If he was horribly defeated, how many points would he get? What an undeserved calamity. Shoo, lower your voice. No one was optimistic about Ling Han, because Qian Bing had already displayed his strength in the previous 2 tests. Brat, do you regret it now? Qian Bing smirked coldly. Ling Han shook his head and said, if you can fight, then stop blabbering. Where did you get such courage from? Qian Bing faltered for a moment, then burst out laughing balefully. Brat, though you are pitifully stupid, I still have to admire your courage. He strode towards Ling Han, raising his right hand high. He would definitely let Ling Han know what pain and regret was. He stretched out his right palm and delivered a harsh slap at Ling Han. Ling Han also shot out a palm strike. It was light, and it looked like he didn't have any power at all. Pa! However, his palm strike arrived first even though he had acted later. It landed crisply on Qian Bing's face. As expected, this palm strike really did not have much power. It only caused Qian Bing to sway slightly, but it was this sway that caused Qian Bing's attack to miss its target. Hiss! Those who were watching the battle were all astounded. In fact, they actually felt that it was terrifying. If it had to be said that Ling Han possessed boundless strength and sent Qian Bing flying with a single slap, everyone could still accept that. After all, it was because Ling Han had an advantage in cultivation level. In the cultivation world, a higher cultivation level being superior to a lower cultivation level was absolutely normal. However, the problem was that the force behind Ling Han's palm strike was too small. It was so small that it only caused Qian Bing to sway slightly. What was even more terrifying was that with just a sway, Qian Bing's attack missed its target. Was this a coincidence? If that wasn't the case, then just how skilled was Ling Han's control over his power? Their scalps went numb. The more they thought about it, the more terrifying it was. Meanwhile, Qian Bing was furious. This slap was completely harmless to him, but being slapped in the face in full public, how could he swallow this kind of humiliation? You deserve to die. It was as if he had gone mad, as he attacked Ling Han with all his might. However, to say nothing of the fact that he had just stepped onto the celestial path, even if he was also a sect master like Ling Han could still deal with him however he wanted. There was no difficulty at all right? Pa! 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 Ling Han casually waved his palm, but the crisp sound of slaps rang out repeatedly, endlessly. In everyone's eyes, Ling Han was really too relaxed. It was clearly just a casual palm strike, and should have been very easy to dodge, but it was as if Qian Bing was retarded, and actually took the initiative to lean forwards. This was too strange. While everyone was stunned by the sight, they couldn't help but feel their hair stand on end. Qian Bing was defiant. As he saw it, both Ling Han's power and speed were inferior to his, but it just so happened that Ling Han seemed to possess some kind of evil technique, and he could not hit him no matter what. Hence, he gritted his teeth tightly, and thought that as long as he could seize a chance and successfully counterattack, Ling Han would become a piece of meat on the chopping block at his mercy. Unfortunately, this kind of scene would never happen. All right, stop. In the end, the teacher could no longer bear to watch and called a halt to the battle. Though Ling Han's slaps were not heavy every time, they still had some weight after all. After several dozen to several hundred palm strikes, both sides of Qian Bing's face were already very swollen, and it was a tragic sight. Qian Bing had no choice but to stop. He stared at Ling Han, his eyes burning with fire, as if he wanted to devour him. Even now, he still did not think that he was weaker than Ling Han, but rather that the latter had mastered some kind of evil technique. Next pair, the teacher of the academy called out. After spending half a day's time, the actual combat test finally ended, and after 3 rounds, the top 20 of each division had also been decided. In Ling Han's division, Qian Bing did not manage to get first place. The battle that he had lost to Ling Han was really too humiliating, but thankfully it was not because he was weak, but rather because Ling Han was too strong. Thus, he was still ranked in the top 5. It was the same for Ling Han. With his performance in the last round, he managed to squeeze into the top 5, and was directly selected into the academy. There was no further need for him to participate in the semifinals. The top 50 were brought to the dormitory area of the academy by a teacher. They were all relatively good seedlings, and would be heavily nurtured in future. Ling Han walked out slowly in the academy, searching for his beloved daughter. Behind him, Qian Bing followed quietly. He was dissatisfied. Originally, he should have been first place, but now, he had not managed to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat like he had planned. Thus, he hated Ling Han very much. He was naturally tailing Ling Han secretly because he wanted to wait for Ling Han to walk to some secluded corner, and then take advantage of the opportunity to beat Ling Han up. Otherwise, how could he swallow this injustice? The other's strength was definitely not as strong as his. He was just relying on his evil arts. Thus, if he attacked from behind, he would definitely be able to make Ling Han have no time to cast his evil arts. The academy was very big. Ling Han slightly stimulated his divine sense and soon located Ling Shi. A smile curled up the corners of his lips. Then he headed in that direction. Not long after, he arrived in front of a dense forest. Ling Shi was here. He faltered slightly and saw a figure fly past in the skies, also falling into the dense forest. Those who could fly with their physical bodies were at least at the core formation tier. With a thought from Ling Han, he spread out his divine sense and had a panoramic view of everything in the dense forest. Fuck! Why aren't you going in? Behind him, Chen Bing was scratching his head. If Ling Han entered into the dense forest, he would immediately sneak over and launch a sneak attack, giving Ling Han a harsh beating. But now, though there were few people in the surroundings, there were still people who could see him. He had no wish to leave behind any witnesses. If it was only him and Ling Han, then it would only be their one-sided retelling of events. Couldn't be helped. He couldn't rush Ling Han, so he could only hope in his heart that this guy would quickly enter the forest. In the dense forest, Ling Shi was practicing her sword techniques. She had already advanced into the core formation tier, and it hadn't even been 100 years, yet she had already advanced from Immortal to the 3rd level of the celestial path. The speed of her advancement could only be described as rapid. As expected of Ling Han's daughter, Shou, a figure descended. It was a man dressed in a tight-fitting suit of treasured blue, carrying a treasured sword on his back. His black hair draped over his shoulders, and the contours of his face were as if they had been sliced by a saber, appearing to be filled with heroic spirit. When Ling Shi saw this, she immediately put away her sword, clasped her hands and said, "Senior brother Qi." This man in the treasured blue outfit had the surname of Qi, and his given name was Wu Wei. He was a prodigy in the Silver Moon Academy. He looked at Ling Shi, smiled and said, "Junior sister is practicing her sword technique. Wasn't that nonsense?" Ling Shi merely smiled faintly and did not continue the conversation. Her meaning was very clear. If there was nothing else, you may leave. Yet Qi Wu Wei did not have that kind of awareness. He stared at Ling Shi, his eyes filled with undisguised adoration. "Junior sister, your natural talent in cultivation is truly amazing. I remember that when you first entered into the academy you were only a second cauldron, but now you have already advanced into the level of the core formation tier. This advancement is truly amazing." Yet Ling Shi looked impatient. "If there is nothing else, senior brother Qi, then I have to concentrate on my sword training." Qi Wu Wei didn't show any displeasure even though he had been given a cold shoulder. He was naturally aware of Ling Shi's personality. He smiled slightly and said, "Junior sister, have you considered the matter I told you about last time?" Killing intent instantly appeared in Ling Shi's beautiful eyes. She had always been gentle and kind to others, but if anyone thought that she really did not have a temper, that would be a great mistake. Because she was Ling Han's daughter. "Senior brother Qi, I've already explained everything clearly to you last time." Very clearly. Her attitude turned cold. "I'm a married woman. Please watch your words and conduct yourself with honor." "Senior brother Qi." "Junior sister, I really like you," Qi Wu Wei hurriedly said. "I don't mind that you're already married. Really, I don't mind at all." With how beautiful she was, and how astonishing her natural talent in cultivation was, he naturally wouldn't mind. "I mind," Ling Shi said coldly. "Now you can leave." She didn't say scram, so she was already being polite enough. Qi Wu Wei also showed a cold expression. After being repeatedly rejected, he had already lost his patience. "Ling Shi, don't be ungrateful," he said balefully. "Who am I? The son of great General Heng Tian, Qi Longtu, under the 9th king, stationed on Moonlight Planet of Shadow Moon Majestic Empire. The fact that I favor you is something that is due to the fortune that your ancestors have accumulated over 8 lifetimes. Get lost." Ling Shi pointed outside the dense forest. She was also completely enraged. "Humph! If you still don't obey me this time, I'll kill your man," Qi Wu Wei said. "He's nothing but a core formation tier cultivator. With the strength of our general's residence, It'll be as easy as blowing off dust. You! She was both furious and irritated. She had not thought that Qi Wuwei would actually use such a shameless underhanded move. How about it? Qi Wuwei didn't want to use this move either. This way, he would only be able to obtain Ling Xi's body and temporary obedience. And he was greedy, so he wanted even more. However, if he couldn't obtain even her body, how could he obtain her heart? Ling Xi remained silent. She naturally couldn't agree. However, what could be done to help her and Fu Tianxing successfully escape from the Moonlight Planet? You don't have much time, and my patience is also limited. Qi Wuwei pressed further. He. I have not managed to accumulate such good fortune in these 7 lifetimes. Ling Han moved, and had already appeared in the dense forest, as he said calmly. Qian Bing was stunned. Why had Ling Han disappeared? He hurriedly set off in pursuit, arriving at the edge of the dense forest. Then he carefully entered, and in the dense forest, after hearing Ling Han's voice, Ling Xi immediately looked excited. How could she not recognize her father's voice? Now was the time when she was the most helpless, but her father appeared at the right time, making her feel warm and instantly have someone to lean on. All this while, she had been filled with confidence in her father. As long as Ling Han appeared, there was nothing that could not be resolved. This was the truth, and also a daughter's admiration for her father. Who are you? Qi Wuwei was taken aback. Why had someone suddenly barged in? 7 lifetimes? You're not Ling Xi's senior, are you? Oh, he said 8 lifetimes just now, and now you've subtracted 1 generation, he said impatiently. Before I lose my temper, get lost immediately. However, the scene that followed caused his face to turn livid. Ling Xi pounced out like birds flying into the forest, falling into Ling Han's arms, still hugging him tightly. Fuck! Qi Wuwei flew into a thunderous rage and felt an indescribable disappointment. He had always thought that Ling Xi was a chaste woman. No matter how much he tempted her, she would not fall for him at all. But now, she was actually throwing herself into the arms of an unfamiliar man. This was definitely not Fu Tianxing. Fuck, so you are this kind of slut. You actually still dare to pretend to be aloof in front of him. How shameless. Ling Han patted his daughter's shoulder before turning to Qi Wuwei and saying, "Commit suicide." To actually dare threaten his daughter, that was naturally a suicidal action. At this time, Qian Bing had also sneaked in. He looked over through the closely packed leaves and couldn't help but inhale sharply. That was Qi Wuwei. How could he not recognize him? He was a true prodigy. Ling Han actually dared to oppose Qi Wuwei? Qi Wuwei couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. Where does your confidence come from? He shook his head. Do you know who I am? You're a corpse, Ling Han said calmly. No matter who you were when you were alive, you're a corpse after death. No one will care who you are. Impudence. Qi Wuwei humphed. Looking at the clothes that Ling Han was wearing, he came to a sudden realization and said, I know. Today is the day that the Academy is recruiting new students, and you're not wearing the same attire, which means that you've just entered the Academy. He came to his senses. No wonder Ling Han was so arrogant, and did not take him seriously at all. As it turned out, he was a pure rookie. However, this made him even angrier. He was clearly just a rookie, yet Ling Xi had thrown herself into his arms. In comparison, what was he worth? He couldn't even compare to a rookie? How could he not explode in fury? You bitch! Even if you want to find a man, you should find someone higher level. You're truly seeking death, Qi Wuwei said balefully, his killing intent intertwining. As he spoke, he even glanced in Qian Bing's direction. Did he think that he had not noticed? How naive. This glance caused Qian Bing's heart to beat wildly. Though he was conceited, he had self-awareness. There was absolutely no way he could compare to Qi Wuwei, whether it was in terms of himself or his background. It was clear that he thought that he was allies with Ling Han. He had been wronged. If he was killed by Qi Wuwei because of this, he would really not be able to rest in peace even if he died. However, being swept by the eyes of a core formation tier cultivator, his heart shivered, and he couldn't move a single finger, let alone turn around and flee. Oh no, he was done for, he screamed in his heart. At first, he had only wanted to teach Ling Han a lesson, but now, it seemed like he was about to suffer great misfortune. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You're not going to choose, right? Then I can only help you make your decision. You're seeking death." Qi Wuwei roared as he charged at Ling Han. He launched a palm strike, not minding killing Ling Han at all. With his background, he could easily deal with the aftermath. Boom, he sent out a palm strike, and the battle prowess of the core formation tier was unleashed. Ling Han extended a finger, and with a light flick, pong! A force instantly pierced through Qi Wuwei's forehead, penetrating out from behind, bringing with it a fountain of blood. Qi Wuwei's eyes widened. He could not believe it at all. He was actually no match for Ling Han. A mere new student. You are just a new student. With this kind of unwillingness, he collapsed loudly, his vitality completely extinguished. Fuck! Not far away, Qian Bing was almost scared out of his wits. What had he seen? Qi Wuwei had actually been killed in a single move by Ling Han. Gods, what abilities did this guy have that a core formation tier couldn't even withstand a single blow from him? Furthermore, he was done for. Qi Wuwei had died, so he should have been happy. He wouldn't be dragged into this mess. But would Ling Han spare him? He would definitely be killed to keep the secret. Yet Ling Han did not take Qi Wuwei to heart at all. He smiled brightly at Ling Shi and asked, "Have you suffered any grievances?" "I'm fine." Ling Shi shook her head. Since Shi and Fu Tianxing came out to roam the world, they were prepared to face difficulties. However, Qi Wuwei was too despicable, so she didn't know how to deal with him at this moment. "Let's go." Ling Han patted his daughter's shoulder. It had to be said that he was prejudiced. Among all his children, he doted on this daughter the most. Ling Shi nodded. The father and daughter duo strode off, neither taking Qi Wuwei's death seriously, and simply allowed the other's corpse to lie there. After a long while, Qian Bing finally collapsed onto the ground. I'm actually still alive?" He breathed heavily, feeling that his whole body was completely drenched. How could Ling Han not have discovered him? Impossible. Even Qi Wuwei had discovered traces of him, so how could Ling Han, who was even stronger than Qi Wuwei, not have noticed? Yet the other had not killed him. This was blatant contempt. At first, Qian Bing was still feeling a little fortunate, but now, his expression was twisted. He was completely ignored. This kind of disregard was the greatest humiliation to him. The other party did not mind his existence at all, and disdained from killing him to keep him quiet. Damn it! Damn it! He clenched his fists, the veins on his neck popping. "You will definitely regret this. Not killing me is the greatest mistake of your life." He strode toward where the higher-ups of the academy were. He was going to tell on him. Humph, if he killed Qi Wuwei, could it be that he could stay out of it and just leave? Die! "Father, is it all right?" After walking for a while, Ling Shi suddenly asked. "It's fine." Ling Han shook his head. "What if the Qi clan comes looking for us?" she asked again. "Then I'll kill them all," Ling Han said calmly. "The reason why that criminal dared to threaten you is because of his background. So be it if I didn't take the initiative to seek them out for an accounting. If they continue to pester me, then don't blame me for being ruthless." How protective he was of his own people, and this was more so his beloved daughter. Now, someone was using underhanded means to coerce his beloved daughter, so how could he not be furious? However, he wasn't a god of death after all, so he wouldn't do such a thing. However, if the Qi clan insisted on not knowing what was good for them, that would be exactly what he wanted. When they returned to Ling Shi's quarters, Fu Tianxing just happened to walk out. Seeing Ling Shi holding the arm of an unfamiliar man so cordially, he faltered for a moment, then revealed a joyful expression. Father-in-law! He had absolute trust in Ling Shi. Thus, to be able to make Ling Shi hold onto his arm without any reservations, who else could it be but Ling Han? It was not a problem at all for the appearance to not match. Those above Celestial Path could easily change their appearance. Ling Han nodded. This Fu Tianxing had also advanced into the core formation tier, and his abilities were no weaker than Ling Shi. He had always had a high opinion of this disciple of his, and Fu Tianqing had not disappointed his expectations either. After entering the room, Ling Shi couldn't help but ask Ling Han about his experiences over the years. Ling Han related some important experiences, then took out a large amount of natural treasures and stuffed them towards the two of them. It was enough to help Ling Shi and her husband charge up to the true self tier. Right at this moment, a commotion was heard from outside. "The people inside! Come out quickly!" someone shouted loudly. Fu Tianqing faltered for a moment. After entering the Silver Moon Academy with Ling Shi, he had always kept a low profile. Why were they suddenly provoked? What was going on? Meanwhile, Ling Shi explained, "Father killed Qi Wuwei. Good kill." Fu Tianqing immediately clapped his hands. "That bastard keeps looking at you strangely. Could it be that he wanted to do something to you this time, and father-in-law just happened to see him?" His guess was really accurate. Ling Han stood up, pushed open the doors, and walked out. "You're the murderer who killed Qi Wuwei?" There were about a dozen over people at the entrance, and the person in the lead was about 40 years old. When he saw Ling Han walk out, he immediately shouted, "Murderer!" Ling Han shook his head. "You have used the wrong word. I am not the murderer. And who else could it be but you?" "That's him." Qian Bing hurriedly jumped out and pointed at Ling Han with his right hand. He emphasized this to the middle-aged man, looking like he was afraid that Ling Han would deny it. Ling Han smiled and said, "Don't be excited. Don't be excited. I was indeed the one who killed him. But you should call me the hero who eliminated evil for the people." "Hero?" The middle-aged man was furious. Pointing at Ling Han, he asked, "Do you know who Qi Wuwei is?" "I don't know," Ling Han replied with a shake of his head. "I'm not interested either. He had killed even the golden generation just like that, so who else in the world would he not dare to kill? Furthermore, to dare covet and threaten his daughter, that was definitely seeking death. Qi Wuwei is the only son of great General Hengtian, Qi Long Tu," the middle-aged man said loudly. "The great General Hengtian is the strongest general under the 9th king. You killed Qi Wuwei, and this is a great calamity that you have brought onto yourself." At this moment, Qian Bing leaned over and muttered softly. Hearing these words, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically again. "You're actually a new student that was only recruited by the academy today?" He was stunned. Being able to insta-kill Qi Wuwei, what need was there for him to be tested? He would definitely be directly recruited. So, why did he hide his cultivation level when he clearly had such powerful strength? What was his purpose? Was he deliberately targeting Qi Wuwei? Or was he trying to use Qi Wuwei to attack Great General Hengtian and directly target the 9th king? It should be known that though the Azure Dragon Majestic Empire had been destroyed for close to 100 years, there were still some people who had not given up on their evil intentions and wanted to rebuild it. "You're a rebel." The middle-aged man was certain of Ling Han's identity. This shocked him greatly, and he hurriedly used Galaxy Network to contact the other leaders of the academy. Perhaps the person in front of him wasn't someone he could deal with. Although he was at the true self tier, it was said that there was no shortage of spiritual infant tier cultivators among the rebels. Moreover, Ling Han dared to come alone, and he even dared to publicly commit murder, which proved that he was confident in his own strength. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. "When did I become a rebel? You're really funny." He paused for a moment, then continued, "If there's nothing important, then kneel down. Kneel your sister." The middle-aged man naturally couldn't kneel. He was a leader of the academy, and from a certain aspect, he also represented the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire. How could he kneel in front of rebels? "Don't be arrogant. The great General Hengtian has already received the news and will arrive soon," he said darkly. "Oh." Ling Han nodded, killing intent flashing through his eyes. If this great General Hengtian also shouted about killing and fighting as soon as he arrived, then he would just kill one more person. Right at this moment, a dozen over people were seen rapidly approaching from afar. "Who killed my cousin?" Among these people, the leader was a man in embroidered robes. He was dignified and authoritative, and also had an indescribable murderous aura. intimidating people just by looking at him. However, a young man rushed out and shouted at Ling Han. The middle-aged man from the academy turned around to glance at him. He hurriedly clasped his hands and said, "Greetings, General Liu." The leading man in fine clothes was a fierce general under the command of the great General Hengtian. His surname was Liu, and his name was Luo. Though they were both in the true self tier, he had battled his whole life, and his battle prowess had been adequately tempered through actual battle. If the two of them were to exchange blows, he would probably be killed within 10 moves. Moreover, his status was higher than his, so even if their cultivation levels were similar, he still appeared very respectful. Lu Luo nodded, and his eyes fell on Ling Han. As a general who had experienced hundreds of battles, his insight was naturally good. With a single glance, he had set his eyes on Ling Han. However, he frowned. He actually couldn't see through Ling Han's cultivation level. Could it be that this brat's cultivation level was superior to his? Impossible. How old was this boy? No matter how talented he was, how could he have advanced to the level of spirit transformation true lord at such a young age? Thus, he immediately suppressed the little bit of unease in his heart. The young man from before was extremely lively. In any case, there were several true self-tier elites here, so what did he have to fear? "You're dead. You're dead." He pointed at Ling Han and said, "You actually dared to kill my cousin. Humph! How audacious!" Though he was rebuking angrily, there was an indescribable joy in his heart. Because there were very few members of the Qi clan, aside from Qi Wuwei, he was the only other member of this generation. Now that Qi Wuwei was dead, wouldn't he become the focused target of nurturing? For a long time, he wanted nothing more than for something to happen to Qi Wuwei. He wanted nothing more than for Qi Wuwei to die young, but he could only dream about it. He did not dare make any move at all. Unexpectedly, his daydream had actually come true. So how could he not be overjoyed? How could he not be elated? Ling Han glanced at him and said with a smile, looking at your secretly pleased expression, "You've long since wanted Qi Wuwei to die, right?" "Fuck, how could you tell?" The young man was shocked, but it was naturally impossible for him to admit it. Hurriedly, he said, "Nonsense. I have a close brotherhood with Wu Wei, and want nothing more than to die on his behalf." Ling Han smiled and said, "It's impossible for you to die in his place. However, I can do you a good deed, and send you to the underworld to accompany this cousin of yours." You are too arrogant, aren't you? There are so many elites here." Lu Luo's expression was also cold, as he said, "Young man, you are too arrogant. With me here, aside from kneeling down to accept your death, there is nothing else you can do." He was about to make a move. Qian Bing was extremely expectant. Though Qi Wuwei had been insta-killed by Ling Han with a single move from Ling Han, this General Liu was a true self-tier elite, and that was definitely different. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "I'll kill him, and you can try and stop me." The young man from the Qi clan was truly arrogant. He placed his hands on his hips and said, "I'll stand here and not move. Let's see how you'll kill me." With several elites standing guard, how could it be that they would just sit by and watch? Ling Han stretched out a finger and very casually flicked his finger. A strong force shot towards that young man from the Qi clan. "How dare you!" Lu Luo was furious and sent out a palm strike, intending to destroy this force. However, when the palm swept past, that force was completely unaffected. What? With a PU, the strong force had already penetrated through the head of the young man from the Qi clan. The young man looked at Ling Han in disbelief. Even now, he still couldn't believe that he was really going to die. How was this possible? Impossible. If he had known, he wouldn't have put on such airs. The last thought flashed through his mind. Then he collapsed to the ground, dead. Seeing this scene, a great many people inhaled sharply. Just how strong was this guy? If he wanted to kill someone, even true self-tier elites wouldn't be able to stop him. Qian Bing's legs were trembling, and he was sweating profusely. He was scared to death. Even true self-tier elites couldn't stop Ling Han. Just how strong was this guy? He actually dared to tattletale and report the news, and was even jumping around happily in front of Ling Han. He was really tired of living. He was about to cry. "You're so awesome. So why do you have to impersonate some new student?" After a long while, Lu Luo finally recovered. He stared at Ling Han and asked, "Who exactly are you, sir?" This was very likely a spirit transformation true lord, though it was practically unimaginable that there was such a young spirit transformation true lord would. This was the only possibility. Otherwise, his attack just now would have affected the force he delivered, and not be completely ineffective. Ling Han still hadn't answered, and he raised his head to look at the sky. Xiao! A figure tore through the air and arrived, then suddenly landed on the ground. A frightening killing intent boiled, as if it was solid, causing one's heart to tremble in fear. This was a middle-aged man who was fully dressed in armor. There was also a scar from his left eye to the corner of his lips on his face, which added a hint of toughness to his appearance. He wore a bright red cloak that billowed in the night wind, his divine might awe-inspiring. "Great General Hengtian, Qi Longtu." "Greetings, Great General." Instantly, those people from the academy, including Lu Luo, all knelt down in front of Qi Longtu. This was a spirit transformation true lord. Spirit transformation tier, no matter where they were qualified to be called elites and have respected status. Qi Longtu raised his hand, indicating for everyone to stand up. His eyes were fixed on Ling Han. What he saw gave him a shock. He actually couldn't see through Ling Han. How was this possible? This young man's vitality was exuberant, and his life force was astonishing. He was truly young, and could only be a few hundred years old. However, he was only a few hundred years old, yet he was already able to cultivate to the spiritual transformation tier and become his equal. If Chen Fengyan were to find out about this, he would definitely say in a leisurely manner that it was impossible for them to be on equal footing. In fact, it would be impossible for them to be on equal footing in this lifetime. Who would have thought? You're so young, yet you've already reached the spiritual transformation tier, Qi Longtu said in a dignified voice. Everyone was shocked. What? Ling Han was actually a spiritual transformation tier elite. Others might have seen wrongly, but how could the great General Hengtian have seen wrongly? Heavens, such a young spiritual transformation tier elite? However, do you think that just because you have cultivated to the spiritual transformation tier, you can strut around in our empire? Qi Longtu couldn't help but laugh coldly. Too naive. Though this was a subsidiary planet of the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire, it was a very important subsidiary planet. That was why they had sent the 9th king to stand guard here. That was a sect master-level elite and 6 stars at that. With the 9th king keeping watch, all demons and monsters would have to retreat. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Since the main culprit is here, let's have a chat. Your son does evil, and I'm exterminating evil for the people. How do you plan to thank me?" What? Everyone was dumbfounded, and couldn't help but grin. What kind of joke was this? You killed his son and still want him to thank you? Crazy. He must have gone crazy. Qi Longtu sneered repeatedly. Young man, I admit that your natural talent in martial arts is astonishing. You have cultivated to the spiritual transformation tier at such a young age. However, the result of rapid cultivation would definitely be an unstable foundation. I've killed tens of thousands of people, and all of them are elites. Can you block such killing intent alone? His expression suddenly became stern. Boom, a surging killing intent surged out, instantly causing the knees of the people in the surroundings to go weak, and they all collapsed onto the ground. This was too terrifying. This was the god of slaughter. However, this killing intent was negligible to Ling Han. He shook his head and said with a smile, "Is this your killing intent?" Qi Longtu was startled. Why was it completely ineffective against Ling Han? He was experienced on the battlefield, and his killing intent was almost tangible. Under his barrage, cultivators at the same cultivation level would definitely be affected. You! He stared at Ling Han, and a coldness suddenly rose up in his heart. Ling Han smiled faintly. Then you can also test out my killing intent. Wang, the barrage of murderous aura shot out. Qi Longtu's mind was instantly destroyed, and his eyes also dilated in an instant. There was no longer any spirit left in them. Pung, he fell headfirst onto the ground. His blood-red cloak was still fluttering slightly, but it was difficult to show his heroic bearing on the battlefield again. A dead silence fell. The great General Hungtian, the strongest general under the Ninth King, died just like that? It was so easy, and there was no intense battle at all. He had died without a sound? This. Everyone was scared out of their wits, especially Chen Bing. Not only did his legs go weak, he even lost control of his bladder, and his eyes had also become clouded. Ha ha ha! He suddenly laughed loudly. I am invincible in this world. I am the great Emperor Peerless. He suddenly got to his feet, and as he danced, he continued to run madly. Crazy, he had actually gone mad from fear. Ling Han smiled faintly. Everyone, the show is over. So what are you still gathered here for? Do you want me to treat you guys to supper? Subconsciously, everyone shook their heads. What supper? At present, they only wanted to get as far away from this bringer of calamity as possible. They hadn't left before, firstly, because it had been too sudden, and have still yet to recover from their shock. Secondly, they didn't dare to leave. Ling Han could insta-kill a spirit transformation true lord, and if he didn't say a word, who would dare to leave? Now that Ling Han had spoken up to let them go, they naturally all hurriedly stood up and broke into a run. Ling Han shot out a few streaks of flames, burning the corpses on the ground completely. What treasures could these people have on them? He couldn't even be bothered to collect them. After returning to his room, he began to teach his daughter and son-in-law various imperial techniques. He had clearly done something huge, but the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire actually didn't react at all. In the following 3 days, everything was calm and undisturbed. Not a single person came. The Shadow Moon Majestic Empire obviously wouldn't cower just like that. Instead, Ling Han was too strong, making them feel like they needed to make full preparations before making a move and killing him with a single strike. Right now, a storm was brewing. The academy gates of the Silver Moon Academy had already closed, and all the students had evacuated, to prevent them from becoming cannon fodder in future great battles. Yet Ling Han was happy with the peace and quiet, and did not care at all. Even if the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's elites ganged up on him, he was still unafraid. This was because his abilities were strong enough, and that was why he was so confident. Of course, the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire was actually a puppet, while the true ruler was actually the Buddhist race. Thus, what Ling Han needed to be concerned about was only the Buddhist race. If they really did indeed mobilize a great elite of Venerate tier level, then even he could only flee. However, this was only the beginning. The Shadow Moon Majestic Empire couldn't possibly send a Buddhist race's big shot so quickly. It should be known that when they ambushed the Azure Dragon Majestic Empire's old Venerate tier, the Buddhist race didn't send out a Venerate tier elite. If the Buddhist race's great elites attacked at the drop of a hat, then with so many territories under their control, wouldn't they be busy to death? Soon it was the 8th day. Ling Han was just predicting his own path of cultivation with eyes closed, when his eyes suddenly snapped open. Finally here, he pushed open the doors and walked out. There was a man in embroidered robes standing in front of him, wearing a flat crown on his head. He was tall and slender, and had an air of dominance. Behind him there were 9 people dressed in monk robes. There were both men and women, and they had all shaved their heads. There were 9 brands on each of their heads. Oh, the Buddhist race had also moved. I am the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's 9th king. The man in embroidered robes spoke up, his voice resounding loudly. Who are you? Ling Han sighed. Don't you know how to talk nicely? Fuck. The 9th king's aura was instantly stifled. What kind of person are you? I'm asking you in the most formal manner. Who is the mastermind behind you? He suppressed his anger and switched to a different tone of voice. Ling Han was too young, so there was definitely someone backing him up. This was what made him wary. Ling Han nodded. You see, talking like this doesn't sound like much effort. So, you obviously know how to talk nicely. So why do you have to be so pretentious? The 9th king began to grind his teeth again. You mock me when I'm talking formally, but when I'm talking normally, you still mock me. What exactly do you want? The other was deliberately diverting the topic. The ninth king immediately tensed. He almost fell for Ling Han's trick. This brat looked young, but his ways were really too shrewd. He had quietly changed the topic. Looks like you are determined to force me to make a move, the ninth king said calmly. Ling Han spread out his hands. If I told you that I have actually come in peace, would you believe me? Ha ha. The ninth king simply laughed coldly. Would he believe it? How could he possibly believe it? Ling Han laughed loudly. If you don't believe me, then forget it. Since you have even invited the members of the Buddhist race, it is clear that there is no way that things would be settled peacefully. Then what is the point of continuing the pointless nonsense? Hurry up and make your move. You really won't give up until you're faced with the grim reality. The ninth king sneered. With a wave of his hand, those monks behind him stepped into the sky one after another, each standing in 9 corners. Then they began to recite. Instantly, a pillar of light rose from the ninth king's body, soaring into the skies. His aura had actually increased greatly. The secret technique of the Buddhist race, praying, which could greatly increase the strength of the recipient. The ninth king was originally a 6-star sect master, and after receiving such a boost, his aura actually increased to 8 stars inconceivably. A whopping 2 stars, this was far too astonishing. The ninth king moved and shot out a palm strike. True enough, 8-star power was boiling, but the regulations that he shot out were only 6 streaks. Ling Han nodded. This was more like it. If the secret technique of the Buddhist race could allow the ninth king to blast out 7 flashes of regulations, that would really be too amazing. At the level of sect master, power was far inferior to regulations. Thus, while the ninth king looked to have reached 8 stars in battle prowess, in truth, he only had power. In terms of true battle prowess, it could only increase his battle prowess by half a star at most, and not even reach 7 stars. Ling Han shook his head. At first, he had thought that the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire had prepared for so long, and would come up with some kind of great trick, but from the look of things now, it really disappointed him. You've put on an act for so many days, and you're only going to show me this? Ling Han shook his head, and his aura fluctuated slightly. Pa pa pa. In the sky, the 9 monks instantly fell down like kites with their strings cut. The ninth king paled in shock. What was going on? He hurriedly attacked Ling Han, giving the 9 monks time to recover, so they could pull themselves together and once again boost his power. Ling Han casually parried. The ninth king was only a 6-star sect master, so even if he reduced his abilities by 100 times, he probably wouldn't be weaker than him. Pong! 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 The battle between the two of them seemed to be very intense, but it was only the ninth king that thought so himself. He wasn't even qualified to make Ling Han take it seriously. However, after battling for a short while, the ninth king fainted and left the battle area, retreating far away. Activate the formation, he called out loudly, his expression livid. This was the last move, and it was one that he very much did not want to use. This meant that he was inferior to Ling Han. However, there was nothing he could do. He couldn't keep fighting like this, after all. Boom! Multiple streaks of light soared into the sky, intertwining to form an inescapable net. Ha! You're surrounded now, so let's see how you're going to escape, the ninth king said coldly. This was the trapped heaven formation which could kill a sect master great elite. There was too little time, and furthermore, there was only the little bit of resources that the Moonlight planet had, which was not enough to set up a killing formation to snipe a Venerate tier elite. Ling Han crossed his arms behind his back and merely smiled. To fiddle with formations in front of a formation grandmaster like him, wasn't that just making him laugh his head off? He only had to step lightly with his foot, and he would be able to change the earth chi, rendering this great formation ineffective. In fact, he could even seize control of the great formation and turn it around to attack the ninth king. AI, just think, the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's elite was only a sect master, so what could they offer that would make his eyes light up? Boring. He threw a punch. Boom! The ground trembled violently, and endless sand and rocks flew into the sky. Instantly, the brilliance that soared into the sky dimmed. The ninth king couldn't help but stare with bulging eyes. Fuck. He had shattered the great formation with a single punch. Heavens, what kind of monster was this? He could clearly sense that Ling Han's aura was also sect master level, but as a fellow sect master, to say nothing of destroying the great formation with a single strike, even being able to last over 100 moves under the great formation was already quite impressive. In comparison, the gap was really too wide. This guy could not be judged on the level of an ordinary sect master. He could only be treated like a pseudo-venerate tier. And just like that old venerate tier from the Azure Dragon Majestic Empire. "Retreat!" he shouted lightly, and led the others away. Ling Han didn't give chase. He wanted to do Chen Fengyan a favor, and defeat a few more elites from the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire. In this way, when Chen Fengyan led the Celestial Sea Planet to become independent, they wouldn't be able to do much either. No matter what, Chen Fengyan had helped him quite a bit in the past. Moreover, he was his junior now, so he naturally had to take care of him. He continued to guide Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing in their cultivation. It could be imagined that he would definitely have to run all over the universe next, and would not have the time to guide his children in their cultivation. Thus, he had to make the most of every minute and second he had now. He stuffed as much as he could, not caring about their cultivation level at all. A dozen over days later, the elites of the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire quietly arrived at the Moonlight Planet. There were a total of 9 sect master elites, and added with the Buddhist race having also mobilized 5 elites, there were a total of 14 sect masters, and the true killing move was the formation that they had brought, which could form a great killing formation to snipe a venerate tier. Ling Han grasped everything through the ley lines. He was still unafraid. Indeed, he was no match for the battle prowess of a venerate tier elite. However, in terms of formation masters, how could Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's people compare to him, a formation grandmaster? Just how powerful was his divine sense now? With a single thought, he could affect the ley lines. And they wanted set up a formation in front of him? Unless it was a saint-level formation, they would only be a joke in front of him. Thus, Ling Han was completely unconcerned. The sect master elites began to set up formations. Every day, they would wander around the surroundings of the Silver Moon Academy. Though Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing were a little worried, they believed Ling Han even more. Since Ling Han didn't take this seriously at all, he must be confident in himself. Could it be that he would still screw over his daughter and son-in-law? 7 days later, the formation was completed. At this time, the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's elites finally strutted out. "Young man, you are indeed courageous beyond measure." The ninth king appeared once more. His status was very high, and even if 14 more sect masters came, they still treated him as their leader. However, it is precisely this kind of conceit that will endanger your life. Ling Han shook his head and said, "We haven't even fought yet, and you're already so sure?" "Humph. Though this formation is not a complete venerate tier-level killing formation, killing a pseudo-venerate is no issue." The ninth king declared proudly, "Don't tell me. Your strength has already surpassed sect master level." Ling Han shook his head and said, "Not to that extent. I am still a little far from even pseudo-venerate tier. Thus, if you bow your head now, I can still spare your life. Otherwise, no matter how prodigious you are, so what? The name of a dead person will not be passed down through the ages," the ninth king stated calmly. Boom! Right at this moment, the great formation suddenly trembled. The ground trembled, and the formation swayed, as if it had suffered a heavy blow. This not only stunned the ninth king and the others, even Ling Han was slightly surprised. What was going on? He clearly hadn't made a move. Hong! 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 The terrifying blasts came one after another, and they were getting closer and closer. It was as if someone had forcefully charged in. This wasn't an illusion. It was only an instant. Pong! The last layer of light that enshrouded them shattered, and an old man with white brows and a white beard charged over. Gagaga! Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's brats. Never thought I'd return. The old man laughed loudly, showing a kind of arrogance. Seeing this old man, The Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's elites all wore expressions of shock. Heavens! This was the Azure Dragon Majestic Empire's old Venerate tier elite. Ling Han was also very surprised. He had not thought that this old Venerate would actually dare make a comeback. He could clearly sense that this Venerate tier elite hadn't fully recovered yet. It was just that his injuries had been suppressed. Who was helping him? Ling Han didn't think that this Venerate tier elite could do it himself. He hadn't been able to do it in the past tens of thousands of years, so what allowed him to do it after fleeing for just a short while? Thus, he must have obtained the help of someone or some force. You actually aren't dead yet, the Ninth King said through gritted teeth. There was a look of intense fear on his face. At the time, they had taken advantage of the fact that the old Venerate tier was heavily injured, and laid out an inescapable net, which was why they had been fortunate enough to attack this old Venerate tier to the point that his injuries would be compounded. At first, he had thought that even if this old Venerate tier elite had not died from serious injuries, he should still be licking his wounds in some corner of the universe. However, he had not thought that this old Venerate tier elite would suddenly charge right up to his doorstep. It was as if he had completely recovered his abilities. This was a Venerate tier elite, completely suppressing a sect master, so how were they supposed to resist? How is this possible? The old Venerate tier elite laughed loudly. Nothing is impossible. Now that I'm back, you guys can also go die. He was very proud. At first, he had thought that there would be no hope of revenge in this lifetime. But now he had returned here, looking down on all life with overwhelming strength. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. The Ninth King called out loudly. To say nothing of the fact that they only had 15 sect masters, even if their numbers were 10 times more, they would still be no match for a Venerate tier. Venerate tier could crush sect master. This was the truth of martial arts. Want to run? The old Venerate tier smirked coldly. Since he had appeared, how could he allow the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's people to flee? He moved and grabbed out at the Ninth King and the others. Boom, his palm blotted out the sky and covered the earth, as far as the eye could see. He was a Venerate tier elite. However, as soon as he made his move, Ling Han discovered that not only had this old Venerate tier not recovered from his injuries, his strength was also far from recovering. Now, this old Venerate tier only had pseudo-Venerate tier-level battle prowess. However, to suppress a sect master, the battle prowess of a pseudo-Venerate tier was more than enough. In fact, no matter how heaven-defying Ling Han was, his current was no match for his current battle prowess was still not enough to compare to this. The old Venerate tier elite attacked aggressively. Pa pa pa. He moved with hatred and killed a sect master with a single strike. In just a few minutes, including the Ninth King, the 15 sect masters were all killed. Ha ha ha. The old Venerate was extremely pleased with himself. He had finally gotten his revenge. Now, he only had to kill the Shadow Moon Majestic Empire's old emperor, and he would have avenged himself completely. And he looked towards Ling Han, an abnormally young sect master. He was really too young. His flame of life was blazing fiercely. At most, he was only a few hundred years old. What cultivation level had he reached when he was a few hundred years old? Cauldron forging tier? Or core formation tier? He couldn't help but be filled with jealousy. Though he was fortunate enough not to die, his vitality was too poor. Even if his injuries were healed, there was no hope for him to reach Saint tier in this lifetime. But this brat in front of him was filled with unlimited possibilities. Brat, who are you? He asked, his tone filled with command. Could not be helped. He was a Venerate tier elite. Ling Han smiled calmly. None of your business. He's so aggressive. The old Venerate tier was astonished. This brat actually dared to speak to him like this? This was natural. He was the one who had suppressed Brother Monkey. So how could Ling Han possibly show him goodwill? You're truly seeking death. The old Venerate tier elite humphed, and immediately moved, pressing down on Ling Han. Ling Han used the star steps, bringing Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing with him. In an instant, they had arrived at the other side of the Moonlight planet. Then, he had them directly use the transfer formation to return to Celestial Sea Planet. After doing all this, He used the star steps and returned to the Silver Moon Academy. The old Venerate Tier frowned upon seeing this. Ling Han appeared and disappeared in quick succession, and even he couldn't detect his movements. What kind of movement technique was this? It was too strange. So you have grasped a strange movement technique. No wonder you dare to be disrespectful in front of me, he humphed. But if I really wanted to kill you, where would you be able to escape to? He moved again. This time, the large hand covered a wider area. Ling Han brandished his fists in response. Old bastard, do you really think I'm afraid of you? Just now, he only did not want his daughter and son-in-law to be implicated. It was not that he was afraid of battle. Seeing that Ling Han actually dared to face him head-on, the old Venerate Tier couldn't help but feel angry. This was a great disrespect to him. Die, he humphed lightly. A mere sect master, have you gone blind? You actually dare to confront him head-on. Boom! The fist landed on the large hand, but was unable to break through the large hand. Instead, it was suppressed. The giant palm slammed into the ground, causing the ground to tremble like a carpet. Pung, pung, pung. Underground flames gushed out, leaking energy. This was only an ordinary planet, so how could it withstand the havoc caused by the battle prowess of a pseudo-Venerate Tier elite? The old Venerate Tier couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise, because he could sense that Ling Han wasn't dead. He retracted his palm. True enough, though he had created a massive pit in the ground, Ling Han was still standing proudly in the pit. This was too shocking. Though his abilities had fallen below the level of Venerate Tier, it was still a piece of cake for him to kill any sect master. So how had Ling Han managed to withstand it? Old bastard, you're nothing more than this, Ling Han said calmly. With a battle cry, he launched a counterattack. Wang, the barrage of murderous aura surged out, ruthlessly blasting outwards. That old Venerate Tier couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. He felt as if an awl had been stabbed into his head, and it was extremely painful. What a terrifying young man. The Divine Sense attack was actually effective on him. He hurriedly spread out his Divine Sense to stabilize his mind. Then, he raised an attack to counter Ling Han's attack. However, in this manner, his battle prowess was naturally greatly affected. Boom! The two of them exchanged a blow, and Ling Han was once again sent flying, but his disadvantage was no longer very obvious. You're truly astonishing, the old Venerate Tier elite said balefully. He launched a flurry of attacks at Ling Han. His palms were like axes, and it was as if he wanted to split heaven and earth apart with each strike. In truth, his attack had indeed had a very great effect on the Moonlight planet. A pseudo-Venerate was really too powerful. However, Ling Han was still unafraid. That old Venerate could only use 26-star regulations, which was stronger than him, but it was still not enough to make him not dare to even battle. Moreover, he had countless trump cards, so he was naturally unafraid. This was just right. He could use the other party to temper his own path of cultivation. Ling Han used the Han fists. Fist intent blazed, each punch incredibly domineering. Ling Han was very strong, but the Venerate Tier was even stronger. He was a Venerate Tier elite, so even if he only had pseudo-Venerate Tier level strength, that wasn't just empty boasting. However, the old Venerate Tier elite was merely dreaming if he wanted to kill Ling Han. Merely in terms of abilities, there wasn't much of a gap between the two of them, what more when Ling Han had countless trump cards. In fact, if he took out the Energy Jade, he was completely capable of screwing him over. The old Venerate Tier became more and more astonished as he fought. How could there be such a minor advanced tier? This was too strong, wasn't it? Tisk, old sun is here. With a harsh exclamation, a staff shadow descended from the skies, smashing towards the old Venerate Tier's head. Brother Monkey was here. The old Venerate Tier's expression changed drastically. How was this possible? The Moonlight planet actually had a fourth extreme elite? Shouldn't he be the only one? How could he still bother about Ling Han? He hurriedly retreated, not daring to face his attack head-on. To say nothing of the fact that his current strength had dropped from the level of Venerate Tier, even if he was still maintained at his prime condition, there was still no way that he would be a match for Brother Monkey. Who was Brother Monkey? He had aptitude comparable to the golden generation, as well as a saintly material weapon. Even 9-star venerate tiers wouldn't dare to face the strike head-on, let alone him, whose strength had already retreated to pseudo-venerate tier level. Brother Monkey attacked repeatedly, and the old venerate tier elite retreated continuously. There was no doubt about this at all. He was completely suppressed. "It's you." The old venerate tier elite revealed a shocked expression. He recognized Brother Monkey. This wasn't difficult at all. Brother Monkey's appearance hadn't changed much since 2000 to 300 years ago. Moreover, his sharp mouth, monkey-like cheeks, and fiery temper left a deep impression on everyone. However, what surprised the old venerate was the fact that Brother Monkey had actually become a venerate after only so many years. Fuck! Where's the barrier to the cultivation level? Do you really think that the barrier to the cultivation level is just a joke and non-existent? Do you think you can break through just because you want to? Just think, how old had he been when he had reached the level of 9-star sect master? 20,000 years old. He was only 20,000 years old, yet he had spent a whopping 17,000 years to finally break through to the venerate tier. Moreover, because he was too old and his vitality was waning, he had clearly attained complete comprehension, yet still almost failed. It was also because of this that he had been unable to unleash his full battle prowess. It was because of this that he had suffered hidden wounds in the subsequent battle. This had caused a huge disaster. But what about Brother Monkey? He couldn't compare, he didn't dare to. Looking at Ling Han beside him, that was even more infuriating. He was only a few hundred years old at most. Shua, the staff swept out, terrifying without bounds. The old venerate tier hurriedly came back to his senses, dodging with all his might, not daring to take a blow head-on at all. In truth, even if Brother Monkey did not use a saintly material weapon, he would not dare to take it head-on either, because the gap in battle prowess was too wide. If he took it head-on, he would definitely die. However, at present, he was only struggling at death's door, and would not be able to last a few moves. The venerate tier elite truly wanted to cry. Was it easy for him? In the past, he had fled like a stray dog. Now that he had finally made a comeback, he should have been able to enjoy a glorious life. But who would have expected that he would suffer another terrible defeat? He said harshly, "Monkey, do you know whose orders I have come under?" Ling Han immediately smiled internally. As expected, this old geezer had gotten help from someone. Who cares who he is? I, old son, will knock them all down with a single strike. Brother Monkey ignored him completely. With a wave of his staff, it was as if he wanted to destroy the heavens and earth. "That's the Ziwei Imperial Clan," the old venerate said. "I received the help of the Ziwei Imperial Clan and healed my injuries. Now, under the command of the Ziwei Imperial Clan, I've come to reclaim the Moonlight Planet and expand my territory." Using the Imperial Clan to intimidate them? Didn't he know that they had even killed a considerable number of Imperial sons? Oh, what benefits would the Ziwei Imperial Clan gain from doing this? Ling Han asked. What didn't the Ziwei Imperial Clan have? To the point that they needed to specially help such an outdated venerate? Humph, what do you know? The old venerate tier revealed a bit of pride, but after being struck a few times by Brother Monkey, he immediately shrunk back. The Ziwei Imperial Clan has a venerate tier that is about to become a saint, so you have to collect the power of belief to light up the holy flame. With these words, Ling Han finally understood. The venerate tier was at the 4th pinnacle level, and 4 pinnacle pillars were propped up in his mind, connecting heaven and earth. And if he wanted to become a saint, he would have to light up the holy flame on the pillars of the 4th pinnacle. This way, he would be able to illuminate the regulations and obtain them from all sources. There were 2 ways to ignite the holy flame. The first was to use one's own flame of martial arts to ignite it, and the second was to gather power of belief, which could nurture it into being. It was obvious that igniting the holy flame with one's own power was more powerful. This was completely without external help. However, there would always be someone who was just that little bit away from being able to ignite the holy flame with their own power, so they could only depend on the power of belief. In truth, those that could completely ignite the holy flame on their own, and through history, aside from the great emperors, there were only a few powerful saints, such as the Nine Sons Saint. Though the imperial clan had vast territories and ruled over countless people, the imperial clan did not just have a single saint. Every time they ascended to the next level, they would need a great amount of power of belief. Furthermore, something like faith could not be changed so easily. Today I would believe this, and tomorrow I would believe that. This was called faith. The power of belief was definitely pure and unadulterated. Furthermore, after having boosted and ignited the holy flame once, this power of belief would be bound to this saint, and could no longer be used by other venerate tiers or saints. Thus, in the territory of the imperial clan, the power of belief was more or less allocated, so they could only set their sights outside the territory. The Buddhist race was promoting themselves everywhere, and in truth it was also to collect the power of belief. Of course, this was only a measly moonlight planet, and was still very far from the Ziwei imperial clan. They naturally wouldn't exert too much effort, and this was just right. They could rescue the old venerate and let him recover the lost territory, providing power of belief for the imperial clan. In any case, there was no need for the imperial clan to exert any effort. Furthermore, they had only helped the old venerate suppress his injuries, and had not expended much. Why, you're not afraid of the imperial clan being infuriated? The old venerate tier elite was both anxious and furious. He had clearly mentioned the imperial clan, so why hadn't Brother Monkey stopped? And Ling Han hadn't tried to persuade him in the slightest either? Why should I be afraid? Ling Han asked with a smile. This kind of rhetorical question made the old venerate feel like he didn't know how to respond. Are you both idiots? That was the imperial clan. A clan that the whole world revered, so who would not be afraid? Aren't you guys afraid of death? However, it was as if Brother Monkey's violent attacks were emphasizing his fearlessness. One staff strike after another, aiming to beat him to death. Pooh, pooh, pooh. The old venerate tier elite kept throwing up blood. To save his life, he was willing to combust his life force to forcefully increase his battle prowess. However, even so, he was still no match for Brother Monkey, and was beaten to a tragic state. The Ziwei imperial clan is about to arrive, and all of you will die. The old venerate tier released a roar of defiance. He had come back to take revenge. Now, he had already taken more than half of his revenge, but he was going to lose his life. This was something that he was unwilling to accept. He didn't want to die. Tisk! Brother Monkey roared loudly, and swept out with his staff. He had activated some of the might of the saintly material. Endless light flashed past, and the regulations that filled the skies seemed to be responding. Pong! The old venerate tier elite couldn't block the strike at all, and he was smashed into pulp.